This is the first volume of the One Piece read-through. My name is Zach.
And my name is Ed.
And today we have the translator for One Piece and Weekly Shonen Jump. We have Stephen Paul. Hey, Stephen.
Hello, guys.
We have from CNN. He is reading this. I don't know if it's the first time, but one of the first few times. We have Jose Argumedo.
Hi. I actually did own the first volume, but we'll get into that later.
We will. We'll get into that. We have one of the hosts from the One Piece podcast proper. We have Steve Yurko. Hey, Steve.
I'm tipping my reading glasses down and saying hello and welcome.
I don't think you have reading glasses.
I don't.
I was doing it for him.
We also have the animation director for Rick and Morty joining us this week, Bryan Newton. Hey, Bryan.
Hey, guys.
Now, just to kind of go through the basics, what this is going to be our mini-series kind of podcast. It's going to be 15 volumes worth. We've tried this before. We're doing it in a different way here today. We're going to be going through anywhere from 3 to 6 volumes a week. Our full schedule is going to be on the description to this episode and on our website at onepiecepodcast.com/OPReadthrough. And we encourage all of you guys out there to read along with us. This week, we're going to go through volumes 1 through 6. We're also going to all go around and talk about how we got into One Piece, when we got into One Piece, because I think this is probably the time to do that. And we're going to have cool guests each week, people that we don't normally have on the One Piece podcast proper, people that we do have on. This week, since it's our inaugural show, I figured why not have the gang together here. This is basically most of our core group here. So why don't we go around, talk about how we got into the show. I'll go like second to last, and I'll go quickly because it's mostly the same thing as what Ed's gonna say. Ed, why don't you start?
Well, Zach, I got into One Piece based on we had to take a writing course in our freshman year of college. You and I were assigned as roommates, and I was in a class that was where the topic was comic books. It's not necessarily that we learned about comic books, but that was what we had to write about. That was our topic.
And, why was I not in this class? This sounds like a great class.
It was. I don't know, but there was a half Japanese girl in the class who started talking about One Piece in there, and eventually she let me borrow One Piece Volume 1, and I don't think I'd finished it. I don't think I finished the whole thing.
I do remember this happening now.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, after getting back into anime, I hadn't watched anime at all, really, for like 3 or 4 years before coming back into it during college, mostly thanks to you, Zach. And then when I went home for summer, I watched through Dragon Ball Z in Japanese and then Dragon Ball in Japanese, and I needed something to watch. So I started watching the One Piece anime, and blew through it in about 2 months, and was all caught up by the time I came back for sophomore year, and I was reading online at that point. And it actually wasn't until much later that I started collecting the manga volumes. So, actually, yeah, wasn't until before, I think around the time, before the time, like the months before the Viz manga speed up happened, and since then I've read through the manga a couple of times, but
better than me,
not recently at least. So it's been an interesting look back.
I'll just tack off of Ed since my story literally weaves into Ed's story. Ed showed...
Well, I did all that, and then I said to Zach, you have to read this, and he blew me off for like 9 months.
I do that with most series. People, for example, today trying to get me into Game of Thrones. I'll blow you off for 9 months, but I'll totally watch it eventually.
Still trying to get you in Ghost in the Shell.
It'll happen, okay? It'll happen. And IGPX, I'm going to watch that.
Zach, you should get into wrestling.
That's not gonna happen.
No, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
That's coming from a fan there. No, Ed introduced me to the series junior year of college, so I think that's like 2007. And he's like, here, look at this cool scene. I won't mention, since everything is a spoiler at this point, since we haven't even started. He showed me this really cool scene in the anime. I'm like, okay, no, that's cool. I was never turned off by anything. I just am, when something's very large and there's a lot to, I need like time to process. Okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this. And then I had a really shitty roommate, so I'm like, this is a great time. I don't want to talk to him, so I'm going to watch there was like 300 something episodes of One Piece at the time. I watched it in 2 months also. I think so. Probably the same amount of time it took you to watch half the amount of episodes.
Not quite, Zach. I think there was like 50 more episodes at that point.
Well, I watched it too quick. Anyway, got all the way to the Thriller Bark stuff, and then eventually I realized, wait, the anime is really progressing slowly, and I switched to the manga after that, and I haven't looked back. But because of that, since I was so inaugurated into the anime. I haven't read a lot of these manga volumes. I've read some, and I haven't read them straight through. I've read them scattered. When I
which is surprising to me because you own a lot of them many times over.
Yeah, I own them 3 times over and digitally, and so now it's time to read through the whole thing. Jose, what about you?
Well, I think I'm one of the few people who actually stumbled onto the manga first. I didn't see the anime. And this was like way back in middle school. I stumbled on a volume of Shonen Jump when it was still in print, and I read all the ones in Naruto and Dragon Ball Z. Obviously, caught my interest, but so did One Piece. And I bought a volume of One Piece, and then I heard the anime was coming out from 4Kids, and unfortunately, that sort of killed it for me. I did watch it, but I couldn't get into it, and then I just kind of left One Piece for years. And around the time we had started speaking, and when I say we, I mean the One Piece podcast crew and myself.
Summer of 2012.
This was
it that long ago? Wow.
Yeah,
it's been a while. We've known each other a while. Yeah.
I was writing my student comment for law school.
This was around the time the Toonami Faithful podcast was still kind of young, and you guys reached out to us, and I at the time was about to go to Japan, like literally, like I think you talked to me the week before I went to Japan.
It's possible. I don't remember.
I think this was around October, not summer, but yeah. So I go off to Japan and I see One Piece is like everywhere, and I'm like, oh crap, I need to check this out. And so I got back home and I started watching the anime from episode 1 in Japanese, and got to about the end of Water 7, and when I say Water 7, I also include Eni's Lobby, the end of that whole arc. And I got into some filler, and I kind of dropped it. And I tried to pick it up from the manga, tried to pick it up from Thriller Bark, and that didn't really work out. But also, I should mention in between this, OPP Japan kind of spoiled the entire series for me.
Which is a movie you can watch when we're done with the read-through if you're reading this for the first time, where we go through Japan and show just how insanely popular this show is there, which it still surprises me how popular it is.
Yeah. And, through that experience and just being in Japan and, of course, working on OPP Japan, I really got into the show. I just didn't have a lot of time to actually watch it or read it. And I tried to read through Thriller Bark, but I think it's a good idea to just go back from the beginning and read it. I got through 6 volumes basically in the span of like 2 days, not even.
For these 6?
Yeah, for these 6.
Great, yeah. No,
so it was like
they go quick.
Yeah, they go quick. And despite the spoilers and the fact that a lot of this is a lot of retreaded ground, it's really nice to see the art and watch it develop. But yeah, that's it.
I do want to say Jose's going to, as I think we kind of said at the top of the podcast, is going to be reading a lot of this when we get to the later ones for the first time. Jose, hopefully you'll be joining us. I think you've made the promise without being able to know whether you could deliver on it, to be on every episode.
I'm going to try. Yeah. I mean, yes, I know what happens in the anime, but like the manga is very different.
Yes.
Especially this part.
But yeah, we'll get to that. Bryan.
Yeah. I think I've explained before in the podcast, so I'll just reiterate that my first introduction to One Piece is actually from the anime in college, and towards the end of college when a certain doctor who can transform shows up. And it was around the time when the Dragon Ball hype started to die down. I was a huge Dragon Ball Z fan, and I was collecting the Dragon Ball Viz comics. And
the singles?
Yeah, I had
the
singles. Yeah, nice. I had the singles, and I had those early volumes that were a little larger before they came out with the smaller ones.
Weren't those also mirrored, like they read in the English style?
No, they read traditional, yeah. it was weird because like you had the single like comic book pages, but they still read backwards or backwards according to our.
I think it was one of the first ones that they did where it wasn't flipped back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that because like I'm old, so it was almost impossible to find like manga in the States. So like when Dragon Ball Z was airing on the States, I wanted to see what the comic actually looked like, and I can only find like images online. But anyway, enough about Dragon Ball. But in regards to One Piece, a friend showed me One Piece, and a friend also showed me Naruto and Bleach, and I was like, okay, these look like the next generation of Dragon Ball. So when I started working right after college, I think the first 4 volumes of One Piece were out. So I just bought all of those, and I bought the first 4 volumes of Naruto, and I started reading through One Piece, and I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And we got to a certain point that we're going to be discussing this volume, which is this episode, we're on volume 5 and 6. Which was my hooking point. At that point, there were no more volumes of One Piece online. Or no, there were no more volumes of One Piece actually like in the stores.
You can say which number.
Okay, volume 6.
Okay, well that's perfect because that's where we're ending today.
Totally.
Yeah.
So this is exactly how I felt like maybe like 8-10 years ago when I was like, there's no more One Piece, I have to find more. And we had to go back to like the MSN days of like going online finding like
those were the days.
Yeah.
Those days went up to like 2007, 2008.
Yeah, which is again we're almost a decade out from that.
Steve, how did you get into One Piece?
I came across One Piece back at the end of 2002. I believe it was December when a good friend of mine to this day, actually he's the guy that did our Jolly Roger, he brought in this magazine called Shonen Jump, and Goku and Yugi were on the cover. It's like, oh, you should check this out. It's all it's all this manga, and I'm like, hell yeah, give me some of that. And I borrowed it from him, and there was this one series in there I never heard of, and I'm like, what is this called? One One Peg? I don't know how to read this. I could not actually read the logo.
There's an SBS question in one of them that said, how do you read this? It doesn't make any sense.
It's like, well, young man, you're Japanese, so
this is English.
I just remember. Well, I don't know if I should I don't know if you want me to talk about my opinions of it or just.
Yeah, you might as well, a little bit.
Well, I just remember it not looking like anything else I've ever seen in manga or in anime before. So I was definitely not appalled by it, but I was like, wow, this is very, very different. It almost doesn't look manga.
I used to call it the owl eyes. Like everyone has like eyes like an owl. They just look straight in the middle.
I used to refer to it as, it's the Disney manga because there's so much Disney going on in it. And then pretty much I was reading it since then. Then I was there for for when 4Kids had the anime. I was there for when Funimation, took the anime away from from hell.
I'm sorry, it's HFI. No, wait, no, that's
no,
that doesn't work either.
Pretty much, yeah. Since 2002, I've been along for a ride. I've seen it all.
Steven, since you're the current translator for One Piece, for those that don't know, but how did you get it? How did you start getting into it?
Yeah, I think I have everybody on the podcast beat. I'm not sure when Greg started, but I first came across One Piece in 1999. When I did a high school Japanese class report on Shonen Jump. So I went to the Japanese bookstore and I got an issue of Jump, and it had One Piece on the cover. It just happened to be the cover on that particular issue. And that was in the middle of the Arlong arc, which we'll cover on the next episode of this. And
it's already been heavily foreshadowed, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and later that summer, I went to Japan on a student exchange trip, and I brought home the first 3 volumes while I was there, and it didn't really get its hooks into me until I think probably around the same point that Brian's going to mention. So I'll mention that when we get to discussing it. But yeah, I was hooked after that point. And I do remember when Viz launched the Shonen Jump project in 2002, and that was really exciting. But I also I was so entrenched in the Japanese manga at that point that I didn't really keep up with the Viz edition. I think I had the first year I had a subscription to Shonen Jump, but after that. I kind of let it lapse because I was getting everything I wanted in Japanese at the time. And in 2005, I became a pro translator. And it wasn't until 2012 when Viz launched the Weekly Shonen Jump as a digital thing that I got placed in charge of One Piece. So I didn't actually start until the 65th volume was the first one that I did.
All right, so you'll only be our last 2.5 episodes of your stuff. Okay.
Right. But it was kind of interesting because, at first when we started preparing to do this, I was like, oh man, like I've read those old volumes so many times, like I don't need to reread them. I remember exactly what happens in all of these books, which is true. But then it kind of occurred to me like, I have all of the Viz volumes along with all the Japanese volumes, and I check them for consistency things. Like if I need to look up, okay, what did the old translators use for this character's name, or how did they do this character's speaking style, things like that. But I'd never actually read it like cover to cover. Actually seriously just read through the Viz material, especially these early volumes. So that's kind of what I've been doing. That's my process of discovery for this thing is actually kind of going through and just seeing what the previous translators did for all of their choices, which has been interesting so far.
Yeah, and maybe we should start first with that a little bit. This was a very different time. These volumes came out in. I mean, to keep in mind, in just the American anime industry, yeah. It was that also, late? It was 2004? I thought it was.
I believe I'm looking at my copy of Volume 1 here, and it first printing June 2003. So a little earlier than that.
And they had started in 2002 with the magazine. So
right.
But they had a very different process going through it. I mean, there are some familiar names who worked on it, and we'll have some of these. We'll have at least one of these people with us. The first editor, Jason Thompson, will be joining us in a few weeks for this, which we're very, very excited to have him on. Also, Andy Nakatani, who did the translation for it. But it was a very different process. I mean, it's obviously been... The word I want to use is piratified? Is that something like that?
Piratical.
Piratical.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, what did you guys think reading through this? I forgot that was a thing.
Well, I mean, it didn't actually bother me too much, but to the point where you notice, like, swabby.
Yeah,
that's the one that makes me laugh every time. It takes me out of it when I read it. I'm like, come on.
See, I posted
because some of it, like belay that order. That makes sense. But calling someone a swabby, and there was a couple other terms that were just ridiculous. But
Booty.
I think when a certain cat-themed pirate crew come ashore, I noticed it was, oh man, they're going in now.
I think that was the peak of that that kind of style that the
it got a lot better right after that, and it wasn't great before that, but it wasn't like super distracting.
Yeah, but I can also understand how like this and maybe even definitely the 4Kids version kind of turned some people off of One Piece, because like I'm not like a huge pirate fan.
Me neither, actually.
Yeah, so like the pirate lingo was something that kind of like made me groan a lot.
Well, the thing that stuck out to me immediately was just Zoro's name.
Really?
Yeah, because it's Zolo in here.
Well, it's interesting for me because I have newer editions. I have 2008 editions of volumes 1 and 2, but for volumes 3 and 4, I have first editions from 2004.
I have the first editions for 1 and 2 in the new ones.
Yeah, and they say Zoro. Right?
Yeah. And
I have all first editions, so that wasn't the issue at the time.
I was surprised, frankly, that I did not notice it. Like, I mean, I just accepted it. It didn't take me out of like reading.
It's not super bothersome, but it did like, oh yeah, this is Zolo now because they changed it. Which I'm guessing it's back to Zoro in the newer.
No,
No,
No, oh,
consistency
been
is
that way
king.
ever since. Yep.
Alexi's been asked that. Alexi, the current editor of One Piece, has been asked that probably once a day, every day. He's clearly
Sometimes by himself.
so he's clearly not happy about receiving that.
So maybe you guys are used to it, but like when I came back to read it, and I'm like, oh, Zolo, that's weird.
Yeah,
Well-
you just do a mental gymnastic in your head.
I mean-
It's like it's Zoro, got it.
Yeah.
I mean, to defend it, this is true. The R and the L in Japanese, well, actually, Stephen, you should be the judge here, is very similar.
Well, yes, in the sense that you could, you as a creative choice, you could go with either one. I mean, the fact that like his name is written in the Western alphabet, Zoro, and all the background and all the bounty posters and everything like that, kind of cleared it up. But I feel like my personal theory on this, and that I have no idea what the actual situation was behind the scenes, but I think it was basically just that, hey, this was like when they started this was like a huge deal because they were bringing out these really, really big properties, like very expensive properties that had never been seen before in English. You had like Naruto was starting, Shaman King, Yu-Gi-Oh, and so it was a big. Yeah, that's right. So there was going to be a lot of like media tie-ins and stuff, and so that's when 4Kids got involved, and they got the anime series. And I think basically what 4Kids did is they said, okay, we have this on Fox, it's going to be big. Here's what we're looking at. We see this Zorro thing. We know Disney has the copyright on, Zorro the Masked Swordsman, and they're very protective of their stuff. And if we get this to where we think, One Piece can be, it's going to attract that kind of attention. And so
don't get me started on animation legal teams.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you have some stories, but yeah. And so I think so they were basically like, hey guys, can we work together on this? And then Viz is like, okay, so if you guys are going with Zolo, I guess we'll just have to go with that too. And
I think Ed and I could apologize on behalf of all lawyers.
You should.
And then once they'd made the switch, and it wasn't for a couple years that 4Kids actually lost it, and then Funimation picked it up, and they went back to Zorro, and it turned out it wasn't an issue after all. And by that point it was like, well, we've been doing this for however many volumes, we just gotta stick with what we've got now.
The one that I think annoyed more people also is the name of a certain town that comes up in the next episode
that's
that we do,
another
which we'll get to. But
as far as the pirate stuff though goes, because this is not a legal thing. This is just like translation choice. Yeah, creative choice. And this is another thing. Like back in the day, pretty much every series had a translator and then an adapter or a rewriter. And so you would get the translator who would put it into kind of a basic English thing, and then you had this other person who would basically just take that. Usually they didn't have often they didn't have any Japanese knowledge of on their own. They just had to take what the translator gave them, and they just kind of punched it up and made sure that it was nice and snappy, and it wasn't awkward and all that stuff. And for a number of reasons, I think mostly just to do with like costs and whatnot, that you don't really have very many adapters nowadays. Certainly nothing that I work on has an adapter. But back in these days, they certainly did, and I'm 100% positive that's where all the creative pirate lingo stuff came from. And
so don't send Andy or Jason your angry emails. Is what he's saying.
I see.
Right.
Send them the Lance.
Yeah, sure. But what one of the things is that in Japanese, so in English we have pirate talks, the avast, and r and all that, all that stuff that's kind of cheesy, and I'm not really positive where exactly all of that stuff goes back to. The 1940s, whatever, pirates,
Oh,
yeah,
Pirate
movies and the Penny Dreadful novels and stuff like that. But in Japanese, there is no there's no analog to that. It's basically just it just comes across as real rough and tumble speech. That could be the same as gangsters or street punks or whatever sort of ruffian group you could think of. So there's no specific in the Japanese. There is no specific piratey talk. But what happens a lot of times is when you're translating and you're trying to kind of you want to give it a proper flavor. It doesn't want to sound flat. And so, there are certain types of dialects and types of ways of speaking in Japanese that have an analog in English and vice versa. And a lot of times you don't. And I think, especially in English, because English is such an international language, there's just so much more to it. There's more vocabulary, there's more dialects, there's more accents, there's more ways of speaking. And so I think it's easier to kind of figure out a creative way. But Oda himself is also a very good a character writer. And so I think at the time, especially if you look at the art style and stuff, and it's very cartoony, and it it just kind of pops off the page. And I think at the time that they started this, keep in mind too that even if they had done a really close examination of everything that was out in One Piece at the time, it was still only up to the end of Alabasta when they licensed it and started publishing it. And so I think they just didn't quite realize this is going to get a lot more serious, and it's not really going to work with the kind of the very colorful and sort of cartoonish stuff, because the art's going to change, the story's going to get bigger and bolder, and it's just not going to fit as well. And that's kind of why you see, I think, over time they weaned off of the piratey talk.
Yeah, I think there was still a very small amount of it, even very late on. I remember seeing every so often, but it definitely noticeably goes away. So I want to talk about the story itself.
Can I talk one more thing about the art real quick?
Please. We'll get to the art a little later, unless...
Well, it's a Viz's thing, because they replaced all the sound effects with ta-da or sploosh or snap or
sploosh.
I'm literally
watching too much Archer.
I believe it.
No, I'm dead serious. It's actually in here. It's when the sea monster goes away in the first chapter. I'm dead serious.
That's not a euphemism for anything, right?
Sploosh.
No.
Sploosh now.
Put that sea monster away.
It's on page. Hold on. It's on page.
No, we believe you.
It's on the page. It's right after Luffy punches the sea monster.
Phrasing.
I'm really not trying. It's there. That's what it says.
No, spit it out.
So yeah, the kanji that was in the background got replaced, and I guess Viz doesn't do that anymore, right?
No, they still do.
They do in the volumes, not in the
not in the weekly Shonen Jump.
And honestly, and it was actually in that How to Make Jump thing that ran in the Golden Week. If everyone read that. Where the author comes to visit the Viz offices in San Francisco.
It's this manga that comes out from Jump Plus, which is kind of this meta manga, I guess is the way to put it, meta manga, where they go around and see how Jump is made, and they went and visited Viz in the American studios.
And so they actually asked about that they do replace the sound effects in the volumes, but not in the weekly version.
Okay.
But I will notice that the way the sound effects are done in these early volumes of One Piece is a little more distracting. They clutter a little more artwork than they do in more modern, more recent translations volumes.
Yeah, in fact, I think if you look, especially in the first volume, a lot of the sound effects, I think I may be wrong about this, but I think at the time they may have even been doing the sound effects on the computer, but then they were still printing them out and pasting them and then scanning the art or something like that.
Oh, I could see that, yeah.
There's some weird stuff, but you can actually tell that a lot of the sound effects, the kind of like the blank space behind them, they didn't like cut it out so that the background could shine through. So a lot of the words are actually,
I'm noticing that the
they're
Shanks
even
page especially,
right. They're even more obscuring than normal, but they got a lot better with that over time.
Yeah, and the only way you'd really notice that if you collect like the Japanese volumes, and then it's like a stark difference.
Right.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that, but I haven't been noticing it in the later, when I say later volumes, I mean 5 and 6. I really noticed in 1 and 2. All right, why don't we get into the story?
Let's do it.
Let's start with Romance Dawn. I think that kind of deserves a little bit of a talk, especially since it was a pilot chapter. It's like, 60-something pages. And it's got some of the most iconic moments in the series that have been recreated in giant statues and stuff in Japan. And anyway, Steve, do you want to start just your thoughts on how it looks, how it feels reading it again?
I'm gonna try and go for a reaction of seeing this for the first time before doing a comparison. It's very lively, this artwork. The characters are very expressive, and they have the largest mouths you have ever seen.
What do we call them? Muppet mouths?
Yeah, they're all Muppets.
No, I think they outdo the Muppets. Maybe like unless they're like Sweet Pea, then they gotta run for their money.
They're like the Canadians from South Park? Big flapping heads?
Wow, it's just... it's like I said, it's very like I could tell like some people were really turned off by this series because it does seem cartoony, but for me, I quickly realized that the tone of this comic is I don't want to use the term kid friendly, but it's not
whimsical.
It's not all sunshine and lollipops when the jolly fat good guy shoots a man point blank in the head.
Yeah,
that's why I was like, oh, okay.
I almost felt like that scene was in there specifically because you'd have a first impression that would veer you in a different direction than how the series is.
I think today that would be a full page, like that one, because that panel's just in the corner on the lower corner of the page.
Well, then it follows with another good guy burning a man in the forehead with a lit cigarette,
which is not in the anime.
No, that's not in the anime. Boy, I'm probably your man to talk about the differences between the manga and anime. I think I've seen that anime enough times now. And yeah, one of the main characters, the role model, the mentor, his arm is bit off. I was like, for real?
We'll talk about the very first scene after Roger's execution. Luffy stabs himself in the face.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another thing that was not in the anime.
Which seems really important because he has that scar the entire series.
Yeah, but you got to think about what an idiot this kid is.
Yeah. But I immediately got the feeling reading this manga that this is very pirate. Like these guys feel like pirates, but it has a very unique approach to it, and so it is very Disney. Not always like all the characters. I think Luffy and like Shanks, they don't look so Disney, but it's some like the villains are. And Brian, maybe what I'm talking about here, but it seems like the way they're drawn, everything is based around the movement of the mouth, of the lips. Everything is structured around that. Like
I could see that because Disney is very much into fluid and vocalized like animation and movements. They would literally watch people talk and make videos of like characters acting and then transcribe that into animation by just like kind of copying and tracing and exaggerating the movement. So everything about One Piece, as we know, is very much exaggerations.
Yeah. Like Higuma the bear is like one character. Like it seems like his face is always like structured based around his mouth, which I think is really cool. Like even the sea monster from the first chapter is one of freaking Ursula's eels. And I got that right away, and I haven't seen The Little Mermaid since like.
Well, he's also drawing upon something that's familiar because a lot of people have seen Little Mermaid.
Mm-hmm. So I just thought like, okay, this is. I've never read a manga like this before. And then again, like I was young, I hadn't seen too much. I'd seen just about what's on Cartoon Network and other channels. But I'd say like Dragon Ball is the closest thing style wise, and even there, it's
a lot different. Yeah.
It's still a lot different. I guess that's the word I keep describing. So I'm just gonna go with that right now. It feels very innovative. It feels something new that, it's charging ground that's never been, taken before.
Jose?
I remember reading this the first time around and just I didn't pay attention to art styles back then, but like the thing that stuck out to me was just the violence, because I don't think I'd really seen. I'd seen a couple of things that were really violent, but like I was like, isn't this for like teenagers or kids? Like, wow, I'm surprised at how violent this is. Shanks's arm gone at the end of this chapter is just what that cemented moment where I'm like, oh, there's something more to this. And looking at it now, I do see the Disney style. I definitely see the eel. Yeah. At first, I was thinking he was like the alligator from Peter Pan. That's my first thought, but you're right. He is the eel. And everybody kind of looks like a Disney character. The guy who gets the cigarette in the face kind of looks like he would fit right at home in Aladdin.
Yeah, totally.
Looking at it now, like the art style is so different and so completely out there. I can see why people are turned off by it, but I'm personally not. Maybe it's because I've grown up watching cartoons. I like the cartoony style.
Well, just on that point real quick, I always notice there's a difference between like quote unquote otakus who see anime as like a totally different vehicle and people who respect like the process of animation and the art of cartooning, I would say. And what most people forget is that like Tezuka was inspired by Mickey Mouse.
Right. The ears on Mickey Mouse were kind of like the hair points on Astro Boy.
Right, and even kind of like his hairline too.
They would always face the same direction.
Well, all of Japanese animation, it was inspired by Disney because they were seeing that and they're like, oh, let's make our own. So,
and there's a reason Disney is so popular in Japan. It's still Disney. I think Tokyo Disneyland, I think it's called.
Yeah,
it's still one of the most popular amusement parks there. It's like that's the site that people go to Tokyo to see from around Japan.
And kind of just to follow up on what where Bryan was getting at. One Piece is a comic, and One Piece is a cartoon. If any of you have a problem with that statement, get over it. Because when it comes down to it, that's what it is.
Yeah, it takes Bryan, the same amount of effort. Sorry. So Romance Dawn. Yeah. I thought this was a killer introduction to these characters in this story. And something I might talk about a little bit is the use of themes that Oda has. And if I'd had any theme for this initial one, it's stand up for your friends. And that is a theme that will stay current throughout the entire series, as we'll see going forward. I actually like Huguma, the bandit, the slimy, dirty bandit who just wanted some beer. I think he had a point. But it's not his story. So it's a story about this kid who wants to become the king of the pirates.
It's hilarious. Something I'll just mention about Higuma. I saw artwork for a future storyline in One Piece, and I was so used to the way these characters were drawn, like their mouths and all that. And there's this one villain, and I thought, and he's kind of like shrouded in darkness a little bit, so you really don't see his full figure. And I thought, oh man, I guess that bandit comes back, and he's like the main villain of One Piece.
It was him all along.
Spoilers, guys. He's not. I don't
think you ruined anything there.
All right.
Ed.
Man, this manga really surprised me, I think, when I read it for the first time, and then going back and reading it again. I was I was impressed by the convictions of it. I don't have as much to say about the art or the style so much as other people, because that's not really what I read things for. The style didn't bother me as much as I think a lot of, as you said, a lot of people were turned off by looking at it initially. But just looking at, it's the strength of the ideals that really comes through in the first volume of One Piece. You see it with what happens with Zoro and with Kobe and Alvida. Alvida, a very Disney-ish villain.
Oh yeah,
very Disney-looking villain. Captain Morgan is as well. But just the idea of having these beliefs and these strongly held morals, I think One Piece is has a very strong moral center. And that comes across even from the beginning, which is, it's interesting to think about that, because I think Oda picked a simple set of beliefs to start with. And it's interesting when you think about the fact that he was 20 when he first started writing this and 22 when he got serialized, that you could keep that sort of consistency of ideas passed down from Shanks to Luffy.
He's in his mid to late 30s now.
Yeah,
but it's still going, that kind of...
Actually, no, he just turned 40.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as we see at the back of Volume 1, his birthday is January 1st, 1975. So, homeboy is 40 and a half now.
oh, okay.
Happy birthday, H.
Happy belated birthday.
Happy belated.
But yeah, I think the thematic consistency and the moral consistency of the story and the ideals of the people involved, especially as seen through Luffy, and I think this is especially apparent with Zoro in Volume 6, just keeping that, the consistency of your dreams, following your dreams, and not letting anyone get in the way of that.
Stephen.
Yeah, no, it's I won't repeat the things that everyone else has said, but I also thought it was, in addition to all of those things, it was kind of a bold move to have basically the entire first chapter, except for the last few pages, be a flashback. And so, the entire time that you are seeing this kid, it's like I kind of wondered, the people reading it in Jump for the first time, if they're like, oh, what the hell is this? Is this manga just going to be about this like 6-year-old kid or 7-year-old kid the entire time? But no, it's like all of this story is just backstory, and it literally, like the last page basically begins with, everything starting. So you don't, he did not. A lot of times, I think with a first chapter, the editors and the creative process will kind of tell the artist, okay, you want to establish your character, obviously, and you need to have them have some kind of mini adventure. There has to be a full story arc that happens in the chapter that tells you a lot about who they are and how they operate, but it usually it sets up what's supposed to be happening in the next chapter to kind of to draw your interest, be like, okay, that was cool. Let's see where it goes from here. And in this manga, it basically, like, the entire thing is just a setup for, okay, here we are. Now it's the start, and you have no idea what's going to come next, which is interesting. I think it's a little different.
Well, I think what Oda does, sorry.
Yeah, I think you're going to say what I was going to say anyway.
Yeah, it's like, I think what Oda does, he's showing that, even though it's not technically a flashback, because we're moving forward from Roger's execution onward, is that Oda shows that he can develop a character and give them the motivation and impetus on where those things come from. So, like, when we'll see with other characters is that, like, a character will have an interesting quirk and you'll wonder, oh, why do they have that? And then later on you'll find out, oh, it's because that moment influenced them, just like when Luffy saw Shanks kind of, like, shrug off the assault from the bandit, and then Shanks comes back to rescue Luffy only because he made fun of his friend. And that's something that Luffy has carried throughout his entire adventure. And Oda's really good about, like, portraying those ideas.
I think he does a good job allowing you to kind of live with the character, and especially as the series goes on. As I said at the beginning, we're going through 75 volumes, and there's still a lot more to go, probably. But because you live with the characters, you feel much stronger about what they do, what happens to them, and I think having just starting Luffy from the beginning like this is the best way to convey that.
But I mean, it also shows where he gets his ideals from.
True.
Who he is patterning himself after. Who does he respect, and why does he respect them? And the first chapter does a great job of setting that up. And
the anime is just not bold enough to make that move.
Yeah, they do that thing where they start in medias res with Luffy.
Well, actually, let's start with where the anime starts and talk a little bit about Alvida and Morgan, which does not take a lot of time in the manga at all.
Oh man, I was
Jose,
surprised at how fast it went.
Yeah, the Alvida stuff is really quick in the manga. I think it's only in one chapter.
Yeah.
I will say this: the Luffy was coming off as just, even despite reading it now, I realize like, oh wow, yeah, he is. He's very established very quickly. He has a lot of personality traits, but I think at the time I'm like, okay, he's your shonen male protagonist. It wasn't until the second chapter when I realized I think there's going to be something different about him. When the thing is with One Piece, I think the problem is it had a lot of tropes in the beginning. I think a lot of stories go through that. If you're just judging One Piece based upon that, I think when people watch the anime, I always say like, hey, get through the first 24 episodes. Like, don't knock it till you got through those, because otherwise you might just think it's like any other story. Because Luffy, he comes across the wimpy, nerdy kid who's afraid of like his own shadow, and there's this moment where he's like, oh, you want to be king of the pirates? That'll never happen. Never, never. And Luffy hits him, and
You're a wuss.
yeah, he just goes up like, oh, you're a wuss. I hate people like you. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? This isn't normal. And I'm sorry to bring this up, but the original English dub, of course, censored the scene. Luffy doesn't hit him. He just kind of moves, and Kobe's like, don't hit me. And Luffy's like, I wasn't going to hit you. People shouldn't hit you.
Oh,
and it's
I remember that.
It's the complete opposite of that moment.
Yeah, totally.
They did.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah,
Like,
4 kids would have a problem with that.
Plot, but don't mess with the ideals.
Well, they messed with both, and the voices, and the everything. They messed with everything.
But my whole point, it's not just, oh, hey, punch kids. It's more like just Luffy just, he tells it like it is, and he believes in himself, and it's kind of like, I think people got this wrong interpretation of Goku because of from Dragon Ball through the English dub of DBZ, but Goku's not a noble hero. He's not a defender of justice, if I could quote some episodes of DBZ we've been watching lately. He's just a guy who just he goes to the beat of his own drum, and he follows his ideals, and Goku just wants to fight and become stronger and just get into these competitive fights. Luffy, he wants to sail out and become the greatest pirate of all. And I'm like, okay, this is different. This character is way more interesting because he isn't just like, oh, I'll save you. I hate it when the weak are mistreated and blah blah blah.
We've seen a lot of times. Luffy kind of seems like ambivalent to threats and social norms and like struggles. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really care. He just like, don't tell me about your backstory.
I'm doing my thing here. It might just so happen that it also goes to justice and whatever it may be.
But I think that Luffy believes in freedom. Being the king of the pirates means having absolute freedom. And I think to an extent that means he's an enemy of those who would oppress other people and make them be not free. But he also wants people to stand up for themselves and seize freedom for themselves. So I think he leads people. He inspires people to do that. He does it with Kobe with Alvida, and he does it again with him at
well, that's why he doesn't like Kobe. Kobe's like, no, you have to listen to everything in the structure, and
you never would hear a character say that, saying, I hate you. And I just couldn't get over that.
Yeah, what's funny is like Kobe always kind of represented the like stereotypical Japanese male in certain animes and series, where you just kind of like, I just want to hit this kid sometimes. I don't want to coddle him. I don't want to say that everything's
like
okay.
The Evangelion kind of thing.
It's like, you just have to grit your teeth because eventually they'll overcome it, and you just have to like wait and watch it. But
just like hit that shit and fast forward.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd imagine if I went to high school or like grade school in Japan, I'd find a lot of Kobe's.
Well, we also get introduced to Zoro in the Morgan stuff through Kobe. And what did you think of Zoro's introduction? And Zoro as a character, since otherwise it's going to take 5 hours if we go through it.
I love Zoro as a character even from the beginning. Zoro, he stands up like he believes like there are things that he thinks that are right and things that he believes in, and he's going to stand up for them. He stands up for Rika when Helmeppo's wolf dogs are tearing up the restaurant, and for that, I think Zoro, at least at the beginning, sort of operates on the idea that people have honor and people will live up to their promises to a certain extent. And I was always kind of dubious about the fact that he believed Helmeppo, that he believed that. But I guess Zoro was wandering through. He didn't really understand the situation as well. That these are such bad people, and but the way he believes in basically standing up, like doing what's right, basically.
Yeah, the greatest moment is when he eats the onigiri.
Yeah.
The greatest
onigiri. I don't know.
The onigiri with sugar and dirt in it, and has
mostly dirt.
It's great.
Helping of dirt.
Yeah, it's great.
Tell her I ate it all. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, he actually did.
Yeah, he didn't even have to do that.
I really love that scene too because I was not expecting that.
They paint him as this like ruthless guy, and if you're a new reader, which I hope many people are listening to this, you think he's a ruthless guy until you get to that part, and you're like, oh, he's not that.
It's not even that. I just never would have pictured someone like it's like, oh no, the food, it's ruined.
Yeah,
like the character is just like, screw it, give it to me. I need to eat something. The characters were just they have these random acts, and I've never seen a character do something like this before. It was. I just had like One Piece wasn't my favorite for a while at the time, but I was picking up on all these things. Like, okay, that's something different.
Another cool thing about Zoro and Luffy's relationship, which Zoro is kind of like he's the de facto first mate. He's the first guy that Luffy comes across, and he's the one who's been with Luffy the longest, and he's the guy who will. He's the one who most often will call out Luffy when Luffy is not or in danger of not living up to his role as the captain. And I think it kind of you can even see that just in the circumstances of their meeting, because this is right at the start of Luffy's adventure. This is like just about the first thing that happens to him. But when we meet Zoro, he's already an established character. Like he has he has infamy. He's like a notorious bounty hunter. He's been out, doing stuff already at the time, and Luffy is just a nobody. And he
sees this guy though. This guy who has the will. He has the belief in himself. He's going to be king of the pirates, and he isn't going to be told otherwise by anybody else. And Zoro thinks that, wow, this guy believes in himself so much that I can believe in him too. And I believe that he'll be king of the pirates, and because he's going to be king of the pirates, he needs to have the greatest swordsman in the world by his side. And by being together, we can both achieve our dreams. Mm-hmm. That's not explicitly stated, but that was the way I always sort of interpreted his reasons for joining.
I always forget to, especially since I don't read the manga as much as I said at the beginning. The anime was my first exposure. How quick Zoro's flashback is. It's very succinct. It's to the point. Yeah. If you had thoughts on that as well.
It's not something you really get attached to. Yeah. Then again, it's not really
I don't know if it's
brought upon until later in the Baratier arc. It's sorry to be Mr. in the anime, but one of our guys on our website wrote an article about anime episodes that were better, than the manga. And he mentioned an episode that the entire episode was dedicated to Zoro's flashback. And it came later. It didn't come till right before the Baratier arc. And holy crap, did it just... It made me feel way more for Zoro and, like, Kuina and just... his ambition. I
remember when I first read this flashback in the manga, I did not believe she was dead. It was kind of like a shocking thing because usually like people have
her father didn't seem that upset about it.
Yeah.
He was sullen.
True.
Like if I could say one thing, it's like the flaw in this. It's like, I know it's a serious situation, but it's almost comical. It's like, oh hey, Kuina fell downstairs. She's dead. It's like that happened in a page. Just like.
Well, you don't even see it. It's
Yeah.
like in between the panels, like, oh, she's okay, and then, oh, I'm sorry, Zoro, she died.
But there's no there's nothing talked about with her sword. And yeah, her father just seemed like he could care less. Like,
but
it's
the
like, Master, can I have her sword? I guess so.
But the genius of that is, sorry,
go ahead.
The genius of that is that's kind of how what happens in real life. Sometimes people just die and their dreams don't get fulfilled, and that's why Zoro's saying like, I'm going to become the greatest swordsman in her place. Mm-hmm. And with her is such a great like moment for me.
It's like he's bringing her dream for her. It is a really great story. I'm going to also put a link in the description to the article you're talking about there, Steve. I tend to agree with that. Jose, go ahead.
I mean, I personally, in Zolo's backstory, I don't really care about her dad. Like, I know I've seen the anime episode, but I really don't care. I like the fact that it's focused on Zolo and his emotions at this moment, and Kuina, as you know, she can't be a swordsman according to her father.
It's okay for you to say Zoro, Jose.
I like saying Zolo.
People are going to yell. This guy's saying Zolo.
He knows he's just fucking with you guys.
I know.
Well, I think the anime kind of her dad still doesn't like cry.
No, yeah, but the anime is like it has, because it's a lot more time. There's a lot wider focus. This is tight, and all the emotions I feel just come out in the art, and you know, just the look on Zoro's face. Zolo, sorry. And
No,
Stop it.
and just the look on Kuina's face when she's like, "You idiot, you're too puny. You know, you can't ever beat me. But you know what? Let's do this together, and we have a future together in trying to do the same thing." I feel like that's all that just really needs to be said. You know, I feel that even though it's succinct, it still hits you right here.
All right, let's talk about Buggy, or else we're never going to get done here. So I think why don't we start, Ed? What were your thoughts on the Buggy arc?
I think the Buggy arc actually is the one that suffered the most, I think, in retrospect. I like it for the fact is Buggy, of all the villains, I think, Buggy and Krieg are the most shallow at this point, and it's to Buggy's credit, you know, as we see even in Volume 6, he's sort of going on this redemption tour, having been stripped of his limbs, and we get to see he gains more depth later on throughout that story arc, and even later on. But and that's why I still think Krieg is the weakest villain. But we were talking about Buggy, and it's the prototypical pirate adventure. Like, these pirates, you know, they come into town and they've taken over. And they've driven out the good, hardworking people of the city. And this is sort of how Luffy operates for the rest of the series. He comes in and he sees that people are being, you know, messed with, and the guy messes with him. And he's like, this will not stand. And we have to do something about it. So,
Bad.
yeah.
Yeah,
He's a clown.
the Buggy D clown.
He has that nose. I mean, don't mention it, but he does.
It's like this was surprising, but at the same time it was expected that, oh yeah, of course, a major villain in One Piece would be a pirate clown. He is very shallow, but it's the point of his character. The Buggy arc is all about treasure and what does treasure mean to someone? What exactly defines treasure? And Buggy is just he's very materialistic in terms of his definition of treasure.
And like we go back to, and he has a flashback in this arc, and we see that he knows Shanks. They were on a ship together where they were scolded by the first mate of the ship, and he holds this major grudge against Shanks because he cost him so much. Like the ability to swim, the ability he lost the treasure map. He wasn't able to find his treasure. So even for the bad pirates, as we see, treasure is important. We see how much it matters to Luffy when his hat is damaged by the knives, and
that's a really important scene too. I mean, we don't see anything like that happen to his hat very often in the show.
I think it was. Well, I think it was really important to establish that early on.
And the treasure thing, because Buggy has the materialistic real treasure, and Luffy has the hat.
Buggy wants everything to be flashy, which we didn't get much in this.
Yeah, but I need
Buggy
more
and Nami are
flashiness.
kind of not that different in that. That they
Yeah.
both-
Well,
Oh, that's a good one.
we'll talk more about Nami.
we'll talk more about Nami
next
because
week,
she is
or 2
introduced
weeks.
around this time.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that's Jose brings up a good point, and Steven, you could also talk about Buggy, but I'll also pose the question. What did you guys think of Nami at this point? We learn more about her character later. That's all I'll say for the moment. But at this point in the story, Steven.
Oh man, she is so she's so spunky and childish looking, physically speaking, at this point in the series.
I can't imagine what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's an SBS later on that I wanted to mention that we were talking about before.
Might as well say it now.
Well, the joke throughout the early SBSs, they were trying to get Nami's measurements, her 3 sizes, and so the second time they asked the question, they asked Sanji to eyeball it. But at the end of it, I wrote the exact quote down here. It was, damn.
Wow,
I gotta find. Oh, it says not that it matters. It's not like things are gonna change size. That was Nami's retort. Come on.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, yeah.
Oh, the times they are becoming quite different.
I pointed out that was actually a bit of a mistranslation, but yeah, it is kind of ironic, just that phrase, because yes.
I did kind of find it nice that they, and I forget how much Sanji's perversions and Nami's and Oda's perversions of Nami are set up so early in the series. It kind of makes me, it's not like, at least he wasn't like inconsistent about it. It's like Oda's always been a pervert who's talked about poop, and
He just got better at it.
it just became more.
Or did he
of a
get
focus.
worse?
Yeah, that's a question. Steven, go ahead. Sorry about that.
About Nami?
Nami and Buggy and the arc and all that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think Nami and Buggy. I actually think it is they are good kind of foils for each other. It's appropriate that those two characters were involved in this thing because of the treasure link. Because as we find out, that is a big deal to Nami, and she has her reasons for this, which we don't realize at first, but. That she is trying to go after treasure. If there's anything Buggy hates, it's the idea of other people getting his treasure or anyone's treasure before he can get it, basically. And I think they work really well. And just one last note about Buggy is I think it was I think probably to me, it was the biggest salvation of this arc was the fact that Oda wrote the connection between him and Shanks, because not only does that does it kind of flesh the world out a little bit, it establishes connections between characters who to our view have not been connected previously, but it is also it serves as a justification to keep Buggy around. He's not just a throwaway villain. Some of the other villains have been thrown away. We're not going to see them again. Some of them we do, and Buggy I think is one of the most principal of those because he has this connection to a very central character in the story and in Luffy's life, and I think that was really smart.
I want to talk about Mayor Boodle a little bit.
I was going to talk about Shushu, but sure, if you want to talk about the mayor, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, Shushu's actually a more important character, so you should talk about him
Yeah.
first.
No, I was just going to say, when I watched this in the anime first, obviously, and this is kind of the material that I haven't read either in a long time or at all in the manga. And I really I was not a fan of the Buggy arc in the anime that much. It drags a lot, and I don't think it does justice to the story. And Shushu is just maybe I've just become more soft-hearted toward dogs over the last few years. But Shushu, I love Shushu, and I love this stupid little story. It's just a lot of fun. Everything from him eating the key and his backstories. I think it's done very well, considering it's on the surface just seems so absurd.
Yeah.
Well, I think something that Buggy kind of introduces that we're going to see in a lot later arcs, and we kind of saw a little bit earlier on, is these little side stories, and they even get their own little backstories, even though it's not part of the same plot. You know, like Chushu is a little dog. He's not really super important to Buggy and this overall world, but
he's the one who lets them get away at the end.
Yeah, he is. But like the fact that Oda takes the time to flesh out this little dog's character is something that we're going to see a lot more, I feel, later on in the series, and you know, I think it's just kind of cool that, you know, nobody is truly a throwaway character. Everybody is fleshed out, whether it's through flashback or just the art of their expressions.
I'm actually shocked he didn't join the crew since he had his own fight against Richie and everything.
But getting back to talking about Mayor Boodle a little bit, I think Boodle is the prototype of the kind of person that Luffy wants to help, because Boodle has his treasure. The town is his treasure. We go back into the past and we see that him and the pet shop owner, like the older guys in the town, they built this town from scratch. The town is their treasure. And
Choo-Choo's that too. I mean, the pet shop was his treasure.
Pet shop was his treasure.
He just couldn't vocalize it.
It was in the chapter called Treasure.
That's how Luffy reacts to people. Like, people who have something that they want to protect, they have a dream that they want to protect. Their dream was to build the town, and Buggy is trying to take that dream away from them. So Luffy is always kind of not necessarily the defender of freedom, but the defender of dreams. Yeah. His dream is to be free. Their dream was to build a town, and Buggy was destroying that, so he had to protect their dream.
Dreams are a very important theme in this series as well.
On a side note, I love Mayor Boodle's design, like the puffy hair with the armor. I'm like, God, I wish he showed up more in the series.
And actually, the way his upper body armor actually makes the rest of his body look kind of scrawny, makes him look weak. But it also, with making him look weak, is an interesting idea when you see his internal strength, like the strength of his beliefs, to the point where Luffy actually knocks him out at one point.
Yeah,
Luffy has to knock him out for his own good.
Yeah. Any lingering thoughts on the Buggy arc before we go into the next one?
Just real quick for, again, new readers. I would say that the Buggy arc, even when I was reading it the first time, is the arc I thought was the weakest, up until another arc we'll discuss later. But every arc of One Piece only got better after Buggy. I would say it's not a bad arc. I just thought it was kind of like weak in comparison.
I think it was a little slow. I think it was probably the slowest of these early ones.
I also figured it's Oda like finding his voice, figuring out how to like tie in threads better and how to make things a little more impactful. It's not that it's a weak arc by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not as good as it could have been and as other arcs are.
I mean, it does essentially end by Luffy kicking him in the crotch, so you could do worse.
Right.
Anyway,
you want to talk about Moji and Kabaji and Richie a little bit, the Buggy crew?
A little bit, yeah. I'm only worried because I think this thing's going to be like 3 hours long. With it. But go ahead.
It's sort of the idea, the theming of pirate crews. We see it with Buggy, and he's the clown, but the people in his crew, they wear the face paint, and the guy who's actually kind of a racist caricature in the anime he looks normal. He just has big lips in the manga.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with full lips in the series, so it's not quite as big a deal.
But yeah, they gave him the brown skin in the anime, and it just looked weird. So actually, the 4Kids colorization of him looked a lot more like the manga, but they only stopped clock and whatnot.
Yeah, but at least the one thing I'll give the manga credit for, they'll add more diversity in skin tone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's true. Later on in the anime, doesn't do that as much, right?
Yeah, sorry, I meant the anime. I've got that reversed.
Okay.
But the idea of Buggy's crew, or his main henchman, being a beast tamer who has hair grown into like bear ears, riding a lion and like fighting with the lion. And the lion has a personality of his own. He gets hungry. He does funny things. And like an acrobat who fights with swords, who rides a unicycle. We really get an idea that none of the crews we're going to see are really normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Sorry, what do you guys think about the fact that Oda revealed that Zoro was originally supposed to be a part of this crew?
Yeah, and it is mentioned in this. I can't. That's crazy to think about. I don't have any.
I like the way he did it in the actual series.
I think he went in the right direction.
Yeah.
Although I could see like Zoro being the member of Buggy's crew who doesn't really believe in it, and seeing like Luffy's convictions and things like that, he decides to betray his crew. But I don't think he wanted to have Zoro betray his crew. It makes more sense for Zoro as a character to not have joined a crew before he joins up with Luffy. It makes it more impactful.
If he had betrayed his crew, you wouldn't trust him. He'd be more like a Yojimbo character at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the next arc. It's not a long one. It's the Gaimon arc.
I was hoping we'd bring him up.
This is something that I forget about every time I read or watch the series, and then this time it was really fun. I thought to read through this story. I always forget about it.
He's the Tom Bombadil of One Piece.
That's a reference that goes way over my head.
I get it.
Are you kidding me? Lord of the
Hobbit.
Rings.
Oh,
Yeah,
Steven,
Just missing a
Lord
song.
of the Rings, sorry.
what are your thoughts on Gaimon, Steven?
Oh man. Yeah, really, really goofy. It's kind of unique in that once like Oda had gotten things rolling with the series, it's kind of one of the only like single chapter stories that we see. It doesn't really, it doesn't fit into an arc. It's basically just a character piece.
It's also a few pages longer than normal.
Yeah, it is, which almost makes me wonder, like, if you went back, was it like a combined issue that it ran in, or was there some special circumstances where Oda was like, okay, maybe I'll just do something a little different here before I launch into the next story. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it's cute, I guess.
We find out about the Red Line and the Grand Line and the Seas. That's actually
is true. That is actually true. I forgot about that. That's where they get brought up, which is obviously very very integral to the course that the story follows. But yeah, I don't know. It's okay, I guess. It's a great character. The story itself is all right, I guess, but how much can you do in one chapter, I guess?
Well, we also find out that the Grand Line is the pirates' graveyard. Spooky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it ends up looking quite like that. Spoiler alert. It's not just a giant graveyard.
There could be graveyards.
It's a graveyard. Nobody lives there.
But that's not...
Yeah. Let's get it.
We're all ahead, right?
Anyway, any other lingering thoughts on Gaimon?
He's a fun, goofy little character. I'm glad he's not. I like the fact that this is, I guess, jumping ahead a little bit. The fact that he's actually kind of integral to Buggy's story in like the splash page, in like the title pages. Because as Buggy goes along, after Buggy's fate in the in the Buggy arc, his fate is kind of revealed, like what happens to him in those pages, and he meets up with Gaimon. Which is funny because it's actually an episode in the anime. So
they used to do that. They no longer.
They did it twice. There's been like 10 cover stories.
I used to feel so bad for Gaimon because I just imagined being stuck in a chest and then my body kind of forming in the shape of a chest, and I'm like, oh man, that's hell.
Yeah, it got better for him.
Like the fact that he's also like the island's personal PETA. He just protects all the animals.
throwing buckets of red paint on people.
Let's talk about the next arc, and I think this might elicit some of the most interesting discussions here. It's the last full arc we're going through, and that's Kuro. Steve, why don't we start with you for this one?
Sure. We're introduced to a new character, Usopp, who he's the boy who cried wolf.
Mm-hmm. And I should point out that his name is a combination of Uso, which means lie, and Aesop, which, of course, Boy Who Cried Wolf is one of the most famous Aesop tales.
I almost want to ask you what's the meaning behind Nami's name, but I wonder if that should be saved for the next installment of this podcast.
Sure.
Because I feel like it's a pun, but if we reveal what the pun is, I feel like it's gonna start to talk about her backstory, and I don't want to do that.
All right, we'll do it next time then.
I won't be on, but someone should ask. Usopp. It's the boy who cried wolf. He runs around a village every morning saying, "Pirates are coming." Nah, psych. Until pirates actually do show up, and those pirates are, of course, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami. They find out, like, oh, hey, there's a rich girl here. Maybe she could give you guys a ship. But she's got she's got a mean old butler who's like, "Get out of here, you kids, scram!" And it turns out this butler is actually a renowned pirate. He was an infamous pirate. He had a bounty. He was a pretty bad dude, and he's been undercover for the last 3 years pretending to be this girl's butler so he could get her fortune. So, of course, no one believes Usopp when he finds all this out and tells everyone. So it's up to Usopp and Luffy and the rest of the guys to stop these pirates from getting into the village before anyone notices.
We also see Kuro, who has poop on his chest.
Hey, Kuro, you got some shit right here.
in the weirdest fucking shoes.
So I think...
Yeah, they're like striped socks.
Yeah.
Oh, man. One thing about Oda, it's like, oh, this is a very intimidating dude. And then you got those freaking zebra shoes.
The most ridiculous outfit.
That's the thing with Oda. It's like he would have these very intimidating villains, but he'd leave these little things in there to kind of like, oh, it's still quirky One Piece. Like it's like Buggy. Like Buggy's like a capable guy. He's got devil fruit powers. He's a decent fighter, but he's a clown. Kuro, he's this killer. He's got poop on his shirt and zebra shoes.
Do we want to talk about devil fruits? We haven't mentioned it yet.
What about that?
There's not a lot going on with that.
I think we could talk a little bit more about that later, especially on episodes that might be shorter. Might be the way to go. But Ed,
they exist. That's all you need to know, and they take away your ability to swim.
Yep, there you go.
There you go.
Done.
Ed, I do want to say something, and that's that I think both of us came out of this reread and with probably around the same idea. I think I talked to you a little bit about this. But when we watched this originally, we were not fans of the Kuro arc. In fact, it might have been our least favorite arc in the anime.
If you listen to early episodes of the podcast, I definitely say that. And my opinion of Kuro as a villain has not risen that much. I mean, I think he's effective at showing like how sniveling and pathetic, like, and devoid of morals a villain can be, and I think Krieg also shows that. But like his plans, like they're so spineless the way he does, like how he planned on doing this. But I think it was dragged out a lot in the anime, which made me hate the arc a lot more. Yeah. So things happen quicker in the manga. And
it was exciting to read in the manga. I'm going to go as so far as to say that. I had fun reading it.
Definitely. Yeah. Like how, like the running through the forest. It felt like it took forever in the anime.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
They did add a little filler.
I did like the anime arc, but like you're right, it's so much better than the manga. I always really liked it though in the anime, and I think the thing that kept it together for me was the relationship between Usopp and Kaya. Kaya? How do you pronounce
it? Kaya. It's pronounced Zolo.
Zolo, got it. Their relationship is cool too, but
yeah, I'm totally with Jose because like I first read this originally, and then I saw the anime a little later, and I thought the anime was great only because I had read it prior.
Yeah. No,
so I knew where it was going.
The thing is, I'm just going to disagree with Ed a little. I forget if I mentioned this later in the podcast, not to break the fourth wall too much, but I thought Kuro was painted, now that I have read it, I think he's a very interesting villain. He is the villain who wants to go to Florida and retire, but the other
his rap name is 401k.
Damn it, why can't we have real episode titles for these?
I guess he's sort of the epitome of the actual real bad guy. Like he has... no redeeming qualities.
But, he is the very opposite of Luffy, which Luffy points out.
I really enjoyed Captain Kuro. I think I don't want to talk too much about Don Krieg. I think he's much more.
We'll talk more about
Don
him next
Krieg.
week. More anyway.
But Kuro, it's like this guy. This thing is like the whole thing is I don't want to be chased around anymore. It's like, yeah, I want riches, but I want peace of mind. I want to just hang out and not have to worry about anything.
He wants a 401k.
He's so delusional though, in that he thinks that he'll be able to pull off all this great plan and ultimately get away with it.
This is what I wanted to touch on.
But at least you got to respect the fact that
Well, he would have been able to get away if it wasn't for those meddling kids.
Yeah, well,
for the fact that his crewmates, his underlings, are completely incompetent idiots.
Yeah.
It's like you couldn't hire better guys.
Well, no, it's
and to compare
Zoro
him-
and Luffy are fucking monsters.
and to compare him to Krieg's dishonesty is much more honest for some
Well,
reason.
I want to say the thing I do like about Kuro, Ed, to just rebut your point, is that his MO is the guy who has these convoluted plans that somehow work out in the end. And that's what he was famous for. What do they call him? Like the tactician or something?
Thousand
Yeah.
plans.
The man of 1,000 plans. But I love how ridiculously stupid this plan is. And Oda really, I think, acknowledges that it's supposed to be incredibly stupid. And that no normal human being would think this would work out. But Kuro would, because it usually works out for him for whatever reason. It's just not going to here. Yeah, I'm going to go there for 3 years and then take the inheritance. It makes no sense.
You know what? It almost worked, though. That's the crazy part.
that is
Nobody
the crazy
voted for
part.
3 years.
Yeah.
Well, from a story point, something I was always kind of dismayed by, Kaya's parents died naturally.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't really. I feel like that could come back later in.
Well, maybe. I
5,000.
always just assume, why didn't Kuro just kill him?
I think the plan was to have his pirates come and kill all 3 of them.
Right, but I think it
probably
would have been
true, yeah.
made better story-wise / villain-wise if he had like
Yeah.
like he poisoned
Well,
them
I
just
think
so
it's
he can
because-
gain her trust.
If I could add, I can't remember off the top of my head, and of course I can't just pop in the DVD and check. I could have swore, and then also this could also be mistranslation, but I could have swore I remember hearing in the English dub him saying like, "Oh, the mother or the father's death wasn't planned."
Maybe, but like in the actual manga, I
Yeah.
think Django even intimated that. Didn't you kill her parents? He was like, no, I had nothing to do with that.
Nope.
But no, but I think
Carbon
that makes sense.
monoxide, the silent killer.
It goes with the 401k thing because he doesn't want to kill anymore. I think he called himself like, I'm trying to have pacifism now, and you're pissing me off, so I can't do it anymore.
Right.
But I think the whole point is I'm gonna go, and then I'm just gonna do this one more thing. I'll just kill this girl, and then I'll have all this money. And other than killing that one girl, in 3 years from now, for whatever reason, it'll be fine.
But you know he'll never be satisfied.
And we'll call the Operation Murder Miss Kaya. That's not going to tip anybody off.
Totally.
I hope nobody's on this open beach listening to us.
You want to talk about Usopp and to talk about Usopp and his relation with both his pirate crew and the villagers,
and the future pirate crew that he'll be
right? And I love Usopp's sort of his influence over his little group of pirates that he has who follow him around and believe in him. And I think he's sort of like he's always thought of himself as the captain, and you can really see that in his interactions with his little crew.
That's also
and,
called spade a spade. His pirate crew is a bunch of like 8-year-olds.
Yeah. Well, they had joined up like 4 years ago, and he was like 12, and they were like 5.
Yeah.
And the way that the villagers view him is I don't know, it's sort of it's very nuanced. They're ultimately very understanding of him.
Any other thoughts on, I guess, Usopp's role?
I pointed this out before, but Usopp and Kaya, just the relationship to me is the best part of this entire story.
Right.
Just because he goes on over and just to like cheer her up, he's like, I'm gonna make some shit up. Let's do this. Let's see what happens. Did you laugh? Cool. Job's done for today. And I'll come back tomorrow and make some more shit up.
Well, it's a great moral lesson about I guess like lying to make someone feel better. It's just this whole thing.
Well, and he had a
Yeah,
lot of
because-
experience with it from doing it with his mother.
His mother.
Yeah.
exactly.
And we find out his father, who had deserted the family, was a member of Shanks' pirate crew. So that is like instabond. with him and Luffy.
Another 6 degrees of separation.
We also got a separation with Captain Morgan and Kuro.
Yeah, which I completely forgot.
I love that.
It's
That's
a great
still one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's the one who ruined his jaw. Yeah,
It's the butt chin.
What I also have a theory is like maybe Captain Morgan's a dick because of Django's hypnosis.
There's a lot of good questions here.
Well, when you read the SBS later in I think volume 6, where he's like, I think maybe Kuro looked into Morgan's eyes and saw a kindred spirit.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that.
He
I remember
actually
that
says
question.
that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that is interesting.
That's probably one of the more insightful SBSs of these first few volumes. They don't even start up for a couple. I think this is the first one. 4.
I think it starts in 3 or 4. Yeah,
It's in 4. Yeah. The question corner.
To go back to Usopp for a second, I was going to point out that I think his relationship to his little pirate crew is actually quite appropriate to his character, because what are they? They're playing pirates. It's like a game of pretend for them, and that's kind of appropriate because Usopp comes to the crew to join the Straw Hats at the end of this arc. He obviously has sharpshooting skill, but he's basically coming as a complete and total amateur, and that fits right in with his kind of role in the story as, he is the everyman. He is the guy who is like the normal guy who is coming on to the crew, who doesn't have like super badass abilities. At least as far as he...
He's good at drawing pirate flags.
At least as far as he knows. He's always been kind of the audience surrogate in certain ways, at least. You see that right from the start.
And it's really interesting, not to go too far into the future, but I think they really establish Usopp and where things may go with Usopp. And I didn't realize how well established Oda kind of put things. It's almost smacking you in the face once you know things. Yeah. But it's great. It's great. Usopp's design, I also just need to mention, looks so completely different at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that. It's like, I'm so glad Oda got better at drawing Usopp. He's almost hideous in the beginning. It takes a lot of getting used to.
I don't remember a lot of people liking Usopp much, and I was never that. I was never the biggest fan, but
what's funny is like Usopp reminds me a lot of cousins I have, but and no slant against them, but just like the flavor of his face and the texture. I'm like, okay, I can see that coming up there. But like the greatest thing about him is Usopp's character himself. Like when he's bleeding on the ground and he can't get up, but he's still issuing commands to his little pirate crew to like take care of themselves and take care of Kyra, like giving them an honorable retreat. It's something he's all about.
Yeah, that's actually a really great little moment there.
Yeah, I think that's the standout.
Really shows the kind of guy Usopp is.
Oh yeah, he's a great and honorable soldier of the sea. What was it? The
brave warrior of the
sea. Thing.
Yeah. Except when he's not brave.
even when he's not brave. Any lingering thoughts on Kuro, and then we'll do the final part.
There's one character we haven't mentioned.
Django?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to talk about
the boat.
Well,
and the boat, yeah.
You got to talk about Mary, but Django is another great, and the Meowman brothers to a lesser extent. But again, the themed henchman. There's a lot of creativity to be had with this, and actually, I think Django is sort of with his moonwalking Michael Jackson hypnotist. He's actually sort of it doesn't necessarily fit in quite as with the theme of the.
Wonder why that is.
I like that he has a mushroom for a beard.
Yeah, I didn't know that. The SPS said that. I had no idea.
Oh, because you guys didn't read, so you didn't get that little...
Yeah, no, that's... What a tidbit.
Also, I love his glasses because Dana has an exact same pair of those. The voice of Sarah.
Oh, yeah, no, they're great. And, no, I won't spoil anyone about the other thing about the glasses.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk a little bit about Mary? They get a ship, finally.
The Merry-Go.
The Merry-Go, Going Mary.
Going Mary, yeah.
Depending on who you're talking. I think people called it the Merry-Go, though. That was
Go is just a suffix for a ship, right?
It's like the SS. Like saying the SS Going Mary.
So I'm wondering why the difference between the anime and the manga here with the ship's name, if anybody happens to know.
I think that was it. Yeah.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Steven. I think a Merry Go is a 4Kids holdover.
That's my suspicion.
No.
No?
Merry Go. I think Merry Go came out before 4Kids dub had aired.
Did 4Kids also refer to as Merry Go or Going Mary?
Yes. Yeah. Merry Go. I think by the time it was airing, I think Baratier was already being published in the Shonen Jump magazine.
I also often forget that Mary was an actual person.
Yeah.
I think, and this isn't going to spoil much, but I think that, there's a race out there of half people, half animals, and I feel like Mary has to be one of them. But maybe
He has
not.
horns.
No, maybe it's just his hair.
Yeah, it could be like, what was that,
sure,
Moji
yeah.
or Moji, right?
Moji, yeah.
Yeah, Moji.
Who had, that's just his hair. That is just his hairstyle. Was that in an SBS or did he actually say
Yeah,
that?
It's just his hairstyle.
I also, I think that's all I have to say about Kuro, unless anything else. I
The
did
last
enjoy
thing
it.
is about the glasses. That's about it, which I thought was very clever.
Yeah, it's
the way he adjusts his glasses.
Exactly.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think Brian, you tweeted
The
something
one
with
cool part about Kuro.
Well, it was just something that, like, okay, back on Oda character quirks, it's something that you don't have to include in the story, but it gives it such a nice texture and flavor and kind of makes your reader feel smart once, like, that's revealed to him. It's like, oh, that's why they did that weird thing. It actually makes him kind of a badass.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, he was almost definitely a badass at some point, but he's not. He just wants to do nothing. He wants to go to Florida. Anyway, let's get into the next part. We get a flag, and we head to get some grub at Baratier. We're not going to go through the whole thing today. We're not going to go about Don Krieg today, but we could at least talk about Sanji.
I thought we were going to talk about Johnny and.
Johnny and Yosuke, of course.
And me.
Johnny.
Come on.
No, we'll talk about Mihawk, but
Okay.
that's the last thing we're going to discuss because that's the very end.
But I think we should talk about them first because the way that they're revealed is kind of funny, and a little
Kind
bit
of.
it's also a little bit foreshadowing, which I always really liked. It's they're firing off a cannon, which they happen to have on the merry-go, and they Usopp, because he's he says he's like this sharpshooter. He instantly hits the rock on his first shot, and they board the ship like, you hit us. We were resting on that rock, and I think it's Yosaku, like whatever his name is.
Yosuke.
Yosaku has
right?
scurvy,
Yeah.
and he's begging for help. Johnny's begging for help, and Nami's like, "You guys don't know what you're doing. He needs lime, and you need to." How do you not know how to handle scurvy?
It's nice to see scurvy as something that's introduced in the story. I often forget that, but these two I also love as characters. I think we'll probably talk more about that next week. But Steve, since you're not going to be on next week, maybe you want to talk a little bit about them. I think you're a big fan, right?
Johnny and Yosaku?
Yeah.
I always like these guys. I don't think there's a lot to them, but they were Zoro's boys before Zoro.
There's a
Went
big
solo.
gap in Zoro's story, and I was always curious to see these three adventures. Like the
I would love to see the in between, and the anime kind of took its own liberties and had an episode where Zoro met Johnny and Yosaku, but not much.
I have a feeling Oda might be saving that for another time too.
I don't
Maybe
know.
I don't know.
We've never, we don't really see them much throughout the rest of the story, but I always kind of like them. I like their designs. They're like the Bill and Ted of One Piece.
Well said.
I like it.
There's not a lot to them. They're kind of cool to have around. Like, oh hey, like they're a good use of exposition. I
love how they call everybody brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they started to call Nami sister, but she immediately made them stop.
And then they're like, all right, brother Nami.
Brother Nami.
Brother Nami.
So I want to talk a little bit about Sanji and the Baratier. We go through in the next segment with Greg a little bit about the history and where that comes from. It comes from a real restaurant that Oda worked at. But what do you think of
Which
this?
is featured in OPP Japan, which you can watch at oppjapan.com.
Thank you, Greg. No, Jose. Thank you, Jose. But I guess your initial thoughts on all these characters, because we're definitely going to get a little more in depth with them next week. Full body, Zeph, Sanji, Steve. I feel like you have to take the helm on Sanji.
I wouldn't say something like, oh, it was this character that made me a One Piece fan. I always liked One Piece, but when Sanji got introduced, I'm like, okay, I really like this character, and now I'm going to be more invested in this series. I want to see where this character goes. I credit Sanji and the Baratier arc for kind of moving One Piece to top priority for me on what to read. Man, it pains me to say this, but Sanji was he was the original Poochie of One Piece. Because I think back, it's like I just always thought he was cool. He was okay. He's like Zoro. He's a badass. He's a fighter, but he's different from Zoro. He's suave. He's sophisticated. He's a sharp dresser. He's always smoking a cigarette. He has unique hair and twirly eyebrows.
Based on Steve Buscemi.
Yeah,
That's the most amazing part of it.
well, it makes sense. Well, based off of Mr. Pink from Reservoir Dogs and
Right.
Sanji's temperament, it all makes sense. I really enjoyed this character. I'm like, okay, we got a good dynamic here because I knew he was joining the crew. I'd seen so many images and other stuff, so I was just
Spoiler alert for that.
And he's so unique. I love his stance. Like, oh, I'm a cook. I need my hands to do what I do, so I can't sully them in battle. So I just kick. And he does this was it capoeira kicks, if I pronounce that correctly, where he just like does a handstand and just spins his legs. And I was like,
Sexy dance fighting.
Sexy dance fighting, break dance fighting. I just thought, like, there's so many things to love about this character. He instantly became my favorite. I drew him a ton of times. And hey, the dynamic of a restaurant just floating in the middle of the ocean, that's pretty unique.
But he also
With a
has
bunch
his
of insane cooks.
He also has his ideals. Like we find out that he's the guy who's been with the Chef Zeph the longest, and Chef Zeph with his peg leg and ridiculous mustache and big,
and his really tall hat.
he's such a character, and we see that Sanji has these beliefs that he holds on to, which I think is it's what Luffy sees in him. He feeds Gin, the downtrodden pirate who is only going to come back and cause you trouble, because that's what you do when you're a chef. You feed the hungry, and you don't waste food, basically. And I think that's where it was kind of telegraphed that he would be the one to ultimately join up, but you can see it when they show him having these taking these strong stances and believing in things and acting on them.
Yeah, without getting in too much of future Sanji stuff, I think Sanji's kind of the most fanatical about the things, his code and his ethics.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about that. I believe I have beliefs about Zoro, but
yeah.
I also want to briefly mention Patty, since Brian, you brought up a resemblance on Twitter, and I want to say the person did retweet what you said.
Get the hell out of here!
Yeah.
Nice. I didn't check on that.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of
you
here!
guys want to explain this to me? I didn't see
explain
this.
it.
Oh,
explain it.
I just realized this. I've been reading this forever. Like, I even said Gaimon reminded me of Martin Lawrence. I always put, like, Martin Lawrence on Patty, too, but I didn't catch him until I noticed, like, Patty fixing himself up. He's totally Sinbad, the comic.
White people.
And Sinbad did respond, "Oh yeah." To that.
Sinbad.
Oh, man.
How is he not verified on Twitter, by the way? He has like 200,000 followers.
He's the only guy known as Sinbad.
That's true. That's true. What other Sinbad could there be?
The funny thing is, when I first saw this character, my immediate thoughts was the genie from Aladdin. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's some more Disney-looking characters. Said like very face structured, around that mouth, and the genie is what I always thought of. With Sinbad, if Sinbad believes it, now I have to believe.
Sinbad literally said Oh yeah, so that's who it is. That's who it is. He also kind of has the facial hair a little bit even.
We already kind of know Oda's kind of hip to like American culture, especially in the 90s.
Steve
so,
Buscemi.
It's funny though. At the end of Volume 1, where they have the mini profile of Oda, it says countries he's been to: Japan and America.
Yeah, and we know he goes to Hawaii later too. I don't. Where in America has he gone? Do we
Freak
know?
state.
I don't know. It just says America.
What?
It's a Simpsons line.
Why would he go to Florida?
All right, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's how big the world gets through Mihawk. And,
oh my god!
And I think, Brian,
Yeah.
I'm going to let you start with this. You hinted that this is kind of what hooked you, and then there were no more volumes. So,
I'm chomping at the bit for this. Okay, so you already set up Don Cree. He's the most badass pirate in East Blue on the Eastern Seas. He goes to Grand Line, gets his ass kicked, and we find out who does it. And literally, this dude shows up with a giant sword and cuts his fucking ship in half. My
His
god.
boat is like a coffin.
His boat's a coffin. And he's just floating on there.
And he looks
He's
like
one dude.
he looks like something out of Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. With his swirly sleeves, and which is actually improved upon in the anime with the eerie green candles.
Yeah.
That actually did improve.
He just looks dastardly as fuck.
I rewatched that anime episode since Crunchyroll recently got the special edition. I kind of want to test it out. I'm like, I just read that chapter. I'm like, okay, this is like one of the most badass things in the first 6 volumes by far. I'm going to watch the episode. It's a great episode. It's a very well done anime episode.
What I love specifically about when Mihawk shows up is that it shows you how big the world is. You think Zoro and Luffy are like badasses, like no one can hurt them really and take them down. Mihawk shows up and completely owns Zoro. He completely decimates
you know that
him.
face that Mihawk makes when he says, "I don't have anything smaller."
Yeah, I have that screen cap of that. Yeah.
So good. And this is really the point where Zoro became my favorite character. You know, a wound on the back is a swordsman's shame.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
And Mihawk just goes magnificent and cuts him down.
I love that.
Let me tell you one of the many tales of Steve is stupid and doesn't understand storytelling.
Is this a new segment we're doing?
I picked up an issue of Jump. That's when Mihawk showed up, and Zoro's going to fight him. Missed out on the next issue, and I just assumed, I guess Zoro just beats him, and then they go on to go after Nami. How stupid was I? Like, Zoro wants to be the greatest swordsman in all the world. Oh, here's the greatest swordsman in all the world. Oh, so I guess Zoro's just going to beat him, become the greatest swordsman, and move on.
But that's also what's so great
Series
about
over.
the series and like Oda's twist. Like, if you were reading week to week, you probably would have almost expected that.
Yeah.
You
Like,
would.
the show's over.
It's insane to introduce the guy that that your protagonist has to beat so early in the story, and then for a main character to be humbled like this. It's that's why I've never seen anything like it. So I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And coming back from that, he says, "I will never lose again."
I said that was my first tearjerker scene in this series, and it really it's not like I was weeping, but I definitely teared up a bit.
You caught some feels.
Yeah, it's just such like, okay, he went there. His dream is literally standing in front of him for him and for his lost childhood friend. He could overcome this, become the world's greatest swordsman, but he gets his ass kicked so hard that it's basically a toothpick that undoes him. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, he's left alive out of not really, I don't want to say mercy, but in Mihawk just kind of admiring and I guess seeing himself in him.
No, it is mercy.
Yeah.
I mean, Mihawk wouldn't normally have mercy on people. He'd just get bored with them. But he has mercy in this case because he likes what he sees both in Luffy and in Zoro. He hasn't seen someone with the convictions that either of them have. He says, "I'm going to be king of the pirates. I'm going to be the man who's going to surpass you as the greatest swordsman in the world." And he doesn't see that in a lot of people.
Well, I also love that Mihawk even points out, like, you trying to be king of the pirates is, like, loftier than trying to beat me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you think what just happened here was tough to watch? What you have to go through next? That might take another 100-something volumes to go through. Any more about Mihawk? Because I'm gonna.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I completely agree with Brian. Like that, the Mihawk thing was definitely where I got hooked. And my perspective on like these volumes specifically, just these like the first half of East Blue here,
6.
is like objectively, I look back at them. This is basically like the childhood of One Piece.
Yes.
Like everything that happens the first time you go through it, it's deadly serious because this is like everything that you see is like each guy is like the worst guy yet. But when you go back and look at them. You just look at me and you're like, oh my god, these guys are so corny, and it's
They're
just
so
like
small.
the stories are so small.
Yeah,
Yes,
I was going to say that. Yeah,
So small.
it's very very small, and Mihawk is the first part I think where you truly see like Oda. I think it's Oda's signature like storytelling move, which is being able to shift your perspective on like the world that he is portraying, and he basically sets up these goalposts where it's like, okay, you thought this is going to be the biggest thing you ever seen yet. No, here it is.
Yeah,
and then
totally.
immediately after that, they have to continue like fighting, this little chump guy.
which we'll talk more about.
Mihawk could squash Krieg like an ant, and Luffy has to fight him for almost a volume.
Yeah,
2 volumes.
And I think there's this sequence, and I was really struck by it when I was rereading this. That is just like if you weren't hooked, now, then what's wrong with you, sort of thing. Where there's the end of the chapter, and it's the very end. There's the page. It's like the very end of Zoro and Mihawk. Zoro's beaten and whatnot, and then the next page is the last page in the chapter, and it's Nami going off on her own on the Mary. And she's crying about something that you don't know what it is, but it's like everything is falling apart. And like until that point, Oda had never done anything like as complex and as kind of jarring as that. And it's just like, oh wow, this, like, he's really taking this somewhere new. And that was the point, I think, where I was just like, wow, I'm just on a ride here, and I don't know where it's going, and it's really awesome.
This really is the turning point for One Piece, more so than what happens in the next arc after this. It's all set up by this turning point.
Yeah, I want to go back on that. Is that like that scene when Nami was set up from the get go? Like she always said, like, I'm not joining you. We're just like temporary alliance until like your means no longer meet my ends. And this was interesting because my first impression of Nami was kind of like your more typical like shonen female sidekick character, like Bulma, I would say. Like she kind of nags the boys while she's there.
Yeah,
she contributes a lot more, which I definitely appreciate. But I was not expecting her to say, "Oh my God, she just stole this ship. What a bitch!" but she has reasons.
We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. Why don't we go into our Reverie segment? We're going to have a very special.
I just wanted to say one thing.
Okay.
It's kind of like the scorpion and the frog, the parable, the scorpion and the frog. The scorpion, stings the frog as they're crossing the river, and they both die. But she can't help it. It's in her nature to steal from pirates.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
anyway.
there's a lot more. We'll definitely touch on that on the next episode. But right now we're going to go into a special segment. Greg is a writer for V-Jump, a Shueisha publication in the official One Piece website. We're going to have him and Jammer, our editorial-in-chief, and we're going to go through not just the how they got into One Piece, but also kind of the consequences as to how these arcs look in comparison to future events. So if you don't want to be spoiled, the next segment is something you might want to avoid, but you could join us at the end, so we'll see you there. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Reverie, and we have 3 kings joining me today. First, we still have Steven here with us. Hey, Steven.
I like that king. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, it's the Reverie.
I can get used to that.
That's who comes to the Reverie. So we have King Steven. We have King Jammer. Jammer, you want to let us know where people could find you and how they may know you?
JosephMedinaWriter.com is awesome. I just started a new podcast at Static Multimedia, the Static Real Podcast, so check that out.
Now, is the URL Jammer, Joseph Medina Writer is awesome.com? Is that how that works?
No, it's just JosephMedinaWriter.com.
Okay.
I know I'm awesome, but can't take too many liberties.
Okay. Getting off to a good start here. And we also have, joining us from Japan, we have King Greg. Hey, Greg.
Hey, so I'm wondering, if we're the 3 kings, which of us has the gold, which of us has the myrrh, and which of us has the incense? No? Can I have the gold? I kind of want the gold.
We three kings of Orient are.
Is that racist these days? I don't even know. Like, can you say
Probably.
one? Probably, yeah. Okay.
It's on the song.
Again, good
No
start.
offense intended.
What's up, gentlemen? How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Greg?
I am great. I'm really happy because I'm happy to be recording with you guys at this time. This is a special time for me. This is early on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, we haven't.
Can I say
used
that?
to do this.
Can we? Spoiler alert: these aren't recorded live. You're not listening to a live show.
Greg, you're ruining it. You're ruining it for everyone. Greg, where may people know you from? Because I know this may take a while just to go through your resume, but you've been with us on the podcast for, I think, almost all of our 6 years at this point. But where might people know you otherwise?
I do a column for OnePiece.com, and I also do a article for VJump. I used to run a website, which is mostly now defunct because I'm busy doing a column and an article each month. So
Went straight.
I went. You've tried the best. Now try all the rest. Right. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm also an English teacher, so I teach English to elementary school children. That is my real job.
Awesome.
At night, I put on a mask and I sit at a desk and I tap it away at a computer.
Now, we actually put a whole episode together, Greg, just for you and your, as we called it, Greg's Bizarre Adventure, because your story is just insanely awesome and mostly unbelievable, but it did happen. And as briefly and climactically as you can, how would you describe your One Piece journey, or what major events happened?
As briefly as I can?
However you'd like.
Okay. One word. Ermagerd. No, let's see. Well, I guess I went from being a fan, like just a Dragon Ball fan, to getting introduced to the series when I was in Japan, on a Rotary Youth Exchange. And I guess long story short, I found Steven's fan translations on the internet when I was looking for some One Piece translations that were readable. And what was the name of the site, Steven? It wasn't Androids Don't Dream, but it was like...
what's that? Robots Never Sleep, I think.
Robots Never Sleep, yeah. And Steven is really the reason why I got into One Piece, like big time, because I read his translations and I was just like, whoa, this is way more deep than I thought it was, because at the time I was struggling through reading it in Japanese. And I guess it's kind of serendipitous that I'm talking about this now, because after I found Steven's translations, the first thing I did was go back to the start of the series and started rereading through it. And that's how I became a really deep fan and found a love for the series. So that's how it started. And now, today I'm doing all those things I mentioned before. If you want to know more about it, I guess check out our movie. We made a movie. It's awesome. Check it out. One Piece Podcast Goes to Japan.
Yeah, OPPJapan.com. And there's a surprise at the end. I guess we won't spoil, exactly what came out of your journey besides, your writing positions. But it's good. Watch that. And then next week, maybe we'll talk a little bit more, or next time we have Greg on, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Jammer, you want to talk a little bit about your history with One Piece?
My history with One Piece, I discovered it in an English edition of Shonen Jump one day, and it was the first chapter I saw was at the very, very end of the Buggy arc, and it was just a whole lot of fun. Like, in a very quick amount of time, I realized this story was able to get me in an emotional, not get me emotional, but sort of get an emotional core, or let me rephrase that again. I don't know, it had some sort of emotional core to it that I hadn't seen in a lot of other series like that were in Shonen Jump at the time. And, I started collecting the volumes around then. I think they were at volume 4 at the time. And I lovingly remember also being drugged at the time because I was getting my
wisdom teeth out?
Wisdom teeth taken out.
Oh, that's a good guess
so
by me.
I had a friend of mine. He actually got a couple volumes for me that I read while I was in a drugged up daze. And I've been following it ever since, and it's been amazing. Like, it's actually crazy going back and reading these volumes, just how different it is in a way. But we'll get into that later.
So I hate to tell you this, Jammer, but you're still in that drugged daze right now. This is.
I was going to ask, do you have to get a hookup on painkillers to like re-experience One Piece as you remember it?
I've thought about it. It's like, I just think maybe you just didn't get all the wisdom teeth, and I can just go under again.
It's gonna end in Luffy Jammer's just holding a snow globe with One Piece inside.
I think if I woke up and
Spoiler alert, Greg. God.
If I woke up and realized that it was still back in high school, that'd be crazy. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, the last panel of One Piece is Jammer waking up. That'd be a meta experience there. Yeah, so this is going to be a little segment since Greg, as he mentioned earlier, it's Sunday morning, so we don't always get the chance to, you're not usually around, what is it, Friday morning or whatever, Thursday morning when we're going to be recording these. So
I'm usually doing that thing I do to get money. Yeah.
That's weird. Your priorities mismatched a little. So I definitely want to get, I'm glad Jammer is also able to make it, get your thoughts on the on our volumes today. As we mentioned, we went through volumes 1 through 6 today. So why don't we start out? Greg, I should first ask, what was like the first stuff you read in One Piece? Jammer mentioned it was buggy for him. What was it for you?
I had the advantage of starting at the beginning.
So that was the first chapter you actually read. Why don't we start with that? This chapter, I think, kind of deserves a little, especially in retrospect with everything that's happened in the series. There's so much to talk about with just the beginning here. If you want to start just seeing things, I'm going to say 18 years later ish. What was it like for you, Greg, reading this again? I mean, maybe not 18 years after you first read it, but 18 years after it was made.
I have so much to say on this, and I'm sure everyone does. But mostly just the fact that 18 years later, I can't go two pages in this without being like, oh my God, oh wow, I can't believe that. Or like, oh, this dude totally is shows up later on. Or, oh, it's the freaking monkey. I don't know. It's just like,
oh, you found the monkey from, that comes back later?
Yeah, monster. Yeah.
Now I want to find that monkey. Where's that monkey? Go on.
He's doing like a Frankie thing. I don't know, like even from the cover. I mean, just look at the cover, and if you look at Zoro's left knee, you'll see a very familiar pattern, and you'll see that actually all those Oda boxes, the designs that Oda draws on them, they're actually from his treasure boxes. How he draws those little curly end marks. I don't know how to corners. But I mean, just from that to finding the origin for, like, Luffy does that thing during parties where he breaks the chopsticks and put them in his nose, or no, he just puts chopsticks in his nose because he's rubber. Like there's a dude doing that in the bar, in Party's bar. So you know that, like, he saw that when he was a kid, and that's a tradition that he carried on. You just get a sense for how many things Oda wanted to put into his story, and he couldn't cram it all in. And it's amazing reading One Piece like this, where Oda was just full of ideas and had to put everything on the line because this was his chance. This was his one chance. And to do what Oda did, to have the success as a I mean, I don't want to say no name, that might be rude, but like as somebody who is their first series, he had to give his best and give his all. And to read this is just like 18 years later, it's still amazing to go through.
How many times have you gone back to read this? Because you have a little more intense experience with One Piece, since it's kind of your other job.
That's a really good question. And the answer might surprise a couple people, but I've only read the series, like seriously read the series from start to finish 1.5 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
But do you find yourself rereading chapters like again and again as they come out?
I don't even find myself rereading chapters so much as I go back to exactly the panel I want to see, or I'm looking for, that part of the story, and reread that section or page or panel.
You're laser focused.
And that's constantly what I'm doing. And as far as how many times I've probably gone through and leafed through the series, in addition to all the work I've done on my website, it's probably, God, over 24 times easy, from start to finish.
Yeah, I believe
Not reading every line of dialogue, but looking at panels, searching for things.
Well, not as much for enjoyment, but more for I don't want to say not for enjoyment.
Back then, enjoyment. Back then, definitely enjoyment.
But more as kind of
now
that
it's more
puzzle.
like, I need to write something. Yeah, it is. I don't know. And I guess maybe that's a little bit, I don't know, somewhere on some spectrum. I don't know. I don't know where I range on there, but it is very interesting to have something to be very detailed and focused on. But this again is just a nice coincidence. I was going through yesterday feeling a little bit nostalgic, and I went back and watched a few episodes of Dragon Ball Z for the first time in I don't know how long. And I was listening to the opening lyrics of "We Got a Power," and there's a lyric that goes, "If you find something that you can lose your mind in, not lose your mind, but get lost in, then you might find out that it'll turn you into an amazing person." And One Piece kind of did that for me, and that's kind of cool because I started with my interest in Japan with Dragon Ball, so it's interesting to see how things can kind of wrap around that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I know, complete coincidence you getting into One Piece in the beginning.
Yep.
No, incredible journey, Greg. Still, it boggles my mind. Or my guard, I think, as you said originally. Jammer, what did you think reading through these again, and how long has it been for you?
I think I started to try to do a reread through rather, right after the Marineford arc ended, like right around the time skip era. And I went back and I think I got about 10 volumes in. And I've since gone back, obviously, now and started over since then, but I actually didn't get much further than that. But yeah, so it's been about, how long has it been since the time skip?
4 or 5 years-ish?
About that long then. Which didn't seem that long ago, actually, but now that you say that. Dang.
So what do you think, reading through these 6 volumes again?
Wow. So this was kind of an experience because I know reading it week to week nowadays, like I was thinking recently, I love One Piece still, but it definitely doesn't evoke the same emotion from me that it used to. Not that it's not as good, it's just different. And I was thinking, I'll never get that sort of, I guess, sense of innocence back. You never get to read things for the first time twice, unfortunately. And rereading this, it's just, I kind of felt it again for the first time in forever. And it's
first time forever.
Did I actually say that?
You did.
Oh, God. Yeah, but it was so weird. It was bizarre because it just kind of accents, how different the storytelling is in a way. Like it's completely different storytelling. Like it's still Oda, obviously, but it definitely feels different.
Is it just me, or is it? I don't want to say exaggerated Oda, but it's like Oda to the nth degree a little more. Or
I don't know. It's to me, it's kind of the difference between. This is a really bizarre type of thing. But if you have a movie like The International, which was sort of this weird.
You've already lost me.
Okay, well, it's
Sorry,
a movie.
Go ahead.
It's one of those really convoluted crime thriller type things.
Okay.
And then something like Taken, it's just very bare bones, emotional core of this. Early on, One Piece, I feel like is more like Taken, where it's all about, very centered on an emotional core. And nowadays, it's more like The International, where it's all about an interconnected, set of events. And it's almost more about that. Yeah, Oda does make stuff about emotion still, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of times we're more there for the story than sort of the emotional core to the story.
Well, that's actually a great transition to what I want to ask Greg here, and that's going through it again. What kind of little things did you notice? I mean, you already mentioned the monkey, but what other things are interesting or popped out or?
One of the things that is really cool, it can actually be connected to one of the most recent chapters, is 785, and if you look at the chapter, there's a part where I think Higuma comes into the bar the second time,
right,
when the pirates are not there, And you've got a bunch of males from the town who see this go on, and they're just like, oh my God, they're like, look at that, we got to go save him. And he's like, no way, there's no way we can save him. We'll never last up against them. And
in the little flashback part, like when he's thinking back, or when
before that, when they actually, before he's taken, it's literally when they bust in for the second time.
Okay. I just want to give...
Or, excuse me, no, excuse me. It's when, what's her name? Makino. When Makino goes to Whoop Slap. She goes to Whoop Slap.
I wonder what he'd think about all this.
Whoop Slap. And she's like, we gotta save Luffy. You'll see them gathered in like the town square area in front of the bar. And there's these two guys. And
I think that's
like,
page 32 and 33-ish.
Okay. And if you look at them carefully, this is one of Oda's policies, and this is getting to my point, is he has a set core of policies, some of which he developed over time and some of which he's kept over time. And the one that you'll find in 785 is that he selects the characters that you'll see in every panel, especially the mob scene characters, with a great level of attention to detail and how they can convey the story in a meaningful way. And sometimes this works to, I don't know, what some might say a disadvantage, whether it be sexist or otherwise misogynist. But if you look at the guys here, the guy on the left hand in particular, he's supposed to look really tough. He's got this kind of like shaved head kind of look. He's got a pierced ear. He's got a scar on his face, a square jaw. He's supposed to look like this really rough guy. So what you're getting here is the idea that even these town people are not jerks, and that's what we're supposed to feel, because even one of the toughest among them.
This is page 2829. Sorry, I was wrong here. It's the bottom left of 2829. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, he doesn't feel confident enough to go up against these people. He knows that they'll be crushed. So you've got this feeling that, oh, well, there's this little kid that's being brutalized in front of the townspeople. Why wouldn't anyone go to save him? Well, there's your explanation right there. And the story doesn't necessarily need that, but this way you're able to connect with the townspeople. The people of what is it, Fuchsia Village? Is that what they called in the English translation? Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
right, Stephen?
Fuchsia.
I don't remember if it was actually ever put in a subtitle. If it was, it's in a different volume that I don't remember.
Yeah,
right.
It's probably much.
It's not actually in here, so
yeah.
But you get the feeling that these people are not jerks. They're just very backwater, small town people. And even the toughest amongst them wouldn't stand up to this guy. They're not necessarily cowards. They just know when they're beat. So looking at 785, you've got the same thing. Who have you got running away from Doflamingo? Well, almost every time we're supposed to be seeing someone running or going somewhere, it's someone with a crutch, or it's extremely old people, or it's people in a hospital. Or it's the grandma running, and he's choosing them not because he wants to randomly draw people or randomly draw grandmas or people with crutches. It's because, hey, look, dummy, this is the kind of emotion I want you to feel. I want you to feel bad for these people and see these situations going on, and he expresses the story without using text. And I know there's
show not tell. You mean that kind
show
of,
not tell?
Did you like to? And
that's a story thing. Yeah.
You want
I'm just going to say,
show and not say it.
Yeah, there's probably a term for it that one of you guys know that I'm not up there, but yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it's awesome to see him doing that in chapter 1 and in chapter 785.
Yeah, I'm gonna be paying attention to that a lot more now. Yeah, I didn't even think of that correlation at all. Anyone else? Something that, or Greg, is there anything else that you notice in all of these volumes? That's
a little bit broad.
I know it's a big question, but I should say in particular that struck you or in your mind still.
I don't know. I'm actually interested in Stephen. I don't know how you felt about these early chapters.
Yeah, well, I had a thought, and this is sort of like a boilerplate question, but just as far as, since it's you and me, Greg, we talk about stuff, and we talk a lot, not just about like when we discuss between ourselves, the chapters and developments and things. We don't just talk about like, oh, what do you think this is, or what do you think that is? But we try to kind of get into Oda's head and figure out where he's going with things, or like what his storytelling purposes are, and how he works. And so I figured I would throw this out there, which is, classic scene of Shanks when he saves Luffy, and you get the sea monster from The Little Mermaid comes up and is gonna eat them.
Jetsam.
Yeah, Flotsam or Jetsam, one of the two. And then he gives them the stink eye, and the creature freaks out and just swims away without anything. And at the time you see that, the first time you read this chapter, you think, oh, it's just one of those like force of presence things. Like, Shanks is just such a badass that
manga trope number
right.
2,400.
Yeah, totally. Just through his sheer presence alone, he just freaks him out and says, "You don't want to mess with me," on an instinctual level, and he swims away. But now you could look at this and think, is this hockey? Obviously. There are other cases where stuff like this has happened later on, where it's much more clear as a kind of the first signs of what Oda would then develop as hockey. But do you think, like, how much of this do you think this was at this point, was Oda just doing, as you said, manga trope number whatever, or do you think he thought maybe this is something to Shanks's abilities that I will develop at a later point, or was it something that he probably came to later, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a really cool scene with Shanks. I can tie this into this new power that I'm going to develop in the story, however many volumes later. Because I think we can probably all agree that Oda does not. He probably did not have like, okay, so chapter 1, I'm starting it up now. I've got hockey. It's going to have 3 different colors. And it's going to be these different. Obviously he's not. He did not develop it all out at that
so
point.
I'm going to have this arc in 18 years.
Right.
It's going to be this feathery guy, and he's going to be
right. Yeah, but yeah. So what do you think? At this point in this series, what's your guess as to how Oda saw that particular scene? Just because it's something that we can look at much later and think, what if that was?
Yeah, Oda is a master at having a broad idea of what he wants to do and giving us little bits of it, because we are hungry little fans we are, yeah. And we'll eat up everything, and he knows that as an author, and he can give us these little bits of information, and we can talk about them, and this gets back to him. He reads every piece of fan mail, regardless of what country it's from. And
even when he doesn't speak the language.
Even when and that's totally serious. He totally reads everything. And that doesn't mean he necessarily understands it, mind you, people from other countries listening, but he does. He browses over every one of them. And he has a sense of what the fans are thinking, of what the fan community thinks. I don't think he's actively going out there and searching for things on his own, because he doesn't. I don't think he really wants to spoil himself for ideas, but he knows what we're thinking. And one of the things he hates to do is to have someone know his story in advance. He doesn't like it if he doesn't like to give us something that doesn't surprise us. And as an author, I think that's an awesome policy. So sometimes it's unavoidable. I mean, if he has a big story movement that he's trying to get to, and somebody out there is, hitting on it, and it's something that's obvious because of his style, it's unavoidable.
Also, there's millions of people out there reading.
There's
millions and millions.
Yeah.
So someone might get the answer to what he's...
Yeah. I'm not going to say that every single detail in the story... Yeah. Not every single detail in the story is going to be something absolutely new or surprising or breathtaking. But what he's good at is giving us an idea while only having a small idea himself, and looking at what we think and kind of developing something simultaneously with his own ideas to make sure that we are surprised and pleased as fans. So when he did this with Shanks, I'm fairly certain that he had an idea in his mind for something in the series that would be a quote unquote power up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just as, I mean, this is it's such great timing. Chapter 785 again.
Yeah.
We've got more hints that there's still potential for power-ups. Mm-hmm. And again, if you go back and you read, and I know you guys, we'll touch upon this, but
or have technically,
or have technically,
yes,
yeah. You find hints that this was there the whole time.
Did you see any hints of that in this part?
Oh man, no way. I think there isn't an earliest time for it, but I mean there might be something even before that we don't even know to look for.
I'm sure. Yeah, it consistently surprises me, and reading these 6 volumes again, that finding things I'm like, oh, he was hinting at that back here. Lots and lots of stuff that either I didn't remember was being hinted at, or just I never realized.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
Or just the way he's able to mine, like even just like mine stuff that he wrote back in the day, not even thinking about it, and just mine it for more stuff. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure,
he knows fans love that too. Yeah, like
yeah.
Oh, mm-hmm. Morgan's back here again with Captain Kuro, for example.
Right.
Which even gets mentioned in an SBS, I think in like volume 5 or 6.
I think the greatest testament, and I think I mentioned this on a message board a while ago. I don't know if I ever mentioned on the podcast, but the greatest testament to Oda's ability to introduce these little things and have them grow into something huge is that I've seen all sorts of people debate this before and be like, I'm sure Oda planned this particular event out in advance, or oh my God, Oda's got to be BSing on this. He totally pulled this one out of his butt. And given my position, I've been able to hear some of what Oda has and has not planned out in advance
from others who were close, who would have known his creative process at the time, essentially.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And no one has hit upon the things that he and no one that I've seen, I should preface that, no one that I've seen has actually hit on the things that Oda has very coincidentally been able to add to the story over time. And that's really impressive. There's one actually that I thought was a little bit, and it turned out that was the case. But it really is impressive how he's able to give us these little hints, and then weave a story around them and weave them into the story as he's telling it. And Haki is definitely one of the big ones. I know we've gone over this on the podcast in the past, but for new listeners, the earliest that Haki is mentioned is, where is it? Volume 25, my favorite volume. I gave Stephen his replacement volume of that because it is my favorite volume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Got to make sure you're on when we're going through that.
It's an amazing volume. I mean, it's really great. And won't talk too much about it now, but that's where you first get mention of it. And we have more hints in Skypiea, and as it goes along, you've got all these things leading up to it. And I'm fairly certain, I say this with no additional information. This is completely my conjecture, but I think that Oda was developing the idea of Haki and its implication all along with us and along with his story. But he always knew that he wanted to use it. And I'm sure that he had some fundamental ideas. And I would venture to say that a Colors of Observation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that yeah? Colors of Observation.
Yeah,
is probably something that he had in his mind from that time, from when we see Shanks looking at the sea. What is it called?
Mm-hmm.
Sea King.
Sea King. King Kai no Nushi.
It's the the
oh
master
no, it was
of
the
near
local
seas
the
or
local
something.
sea beast, I think they called it, or something.
Yeah.
So
And
I
it's
lost
so
my
much.
train of thought.
It's so much better though that way though. Like it's so much better than because I remember reading it at the time and thinking, oh, Shanks is so badass that the thing is scared of him.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, every one of us thought that, I think.
That's so dumb if you think about it. I'm really happy in retrospect that I can look at that and say, okay, well, that's something different. It's not just the animals like, oh, you're scary, and then goes away. It's something different.
But none of us second guessed it because in any other anime or manga series that would completely happen.
That's
that would
true.
100% happen. It's the guy. This guy's a real badass. He stared at it and it ran away. I mean, he did lose his arm. Let's be fair. Which, in retrospect, thinking of what Shanks and who Shanks becomes and is just nuts to think about as well.
It is kind of weird, yeah.
I understand why, and he basically says it later, but
it's not something that requires logic. It's like it was a sacrifice he made for Luffy, and it's about his bond with Luffy and not about like, oh my god, can you believe Shanks got his arm torn off by some stupid fish that he scared away by looking at it?
Well, what an important character moment. I mean, it's right. Besides the hat, which I mean,
I call BS. I think he could have covered his armament hockey and been perfectly safe from getting his arm cut off.
Right. Probably. Although this was how many years before the main plot? 10? Something like that?
Yes.
I should probably have checked that.
Yeah. 10 years, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, 10.
So who knows how strong Shanks was and this is like the really interesting thing when you think about it, how strong Shanks was as a pirate in the world at that point 10 years ago. A lot happens in 10 years. As we may know, a lot happens in 2 years. Okay, now that we've gone through kind of the basics,
one more point.
Please.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry to keep bringing it back to this, but I mean, this is such a deep question by Stephen. It's something that we can debate to no end. But the reason I said color of observation and not something like Hawoshoku is because, or Hawoshoku. God, I'm sorry. This is really tough in dual languages.
The Conqueror's
hockey.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I don't think it was that is I think his idea for the two of them, and I say two because I don't know about Bisoshoku at the time or Colors of Armament, but I think originally they may have been a kind of single idea.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the series, I think you'll find that one of the most important, and again I say this is entirely my conjecture, this is not any information from any source,
but it's Greg, so it's probably right.
No, if I had a penny, every time you, no, sorry, I'm thinking of so much stuff. Sorry. When we come to the end of the series, I think you'll find that the most important and the most, I guess, emotional. We were talking about that emotional aspect of the series, right? Is going to be Colors of Observation. I think you'll see that play a major role in the arc, in the overall story arc at the end of the series.
Okay.
And I obviously have some ideas about that. This is not the time or place to discuss them, but I think it will all come back to that first chapter with his original idea of hockey and what is hockey, and that's definitely something to look forward to in the next decade or so.
We hope a decade.
Set your watches, people.
By 2025, people listening to this will be like, no, not yet. In 10 years. So during most of these episodes, the Reverie will come together and kind of talk about their thoughts on each arc or where it is and the more specific events. I just want to at least talk through, retrospectively about it. So there's a lot of arcs that take place in these first 6. I mean, you got the stuff at the beginning that we discussed. how do you think? Which ones do you like going back rereading them? Which ones do you like more? Which ones do you like less? How have your feelings changed? Greg and Jammer specifically here. Jammer, why don't we start with you?
I always like Captain Kuro arc. That arc means so much to me. I don't know why. I think I had some.
Well, you got to explain it.
Did it involve drugs from your wisdom teeth?
It does not. Actually, that was the buggy arc. But I think, in my mind, Kuro was a very formative arc for my mind as to what One Piece is, in that you have these really, really strong characters and they have these really strong goals, but it's still goofy as hell. Like the Meowbin brothers. Worst villains ever. They are so dumb. But like I was perfectly content to have some like that a writer who was as talented as this and who's able to, as I said before, get me at an emotional core, is able to just turn around and do something so stupid and for just me to be like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll accept that. And the whole Butler thing, how he has poop on his on his
in the
jacket.
SBS. I'm learning new things every time I read.
Yeah, just things like that. Just it could be dead serious, but still have undertones of stupid goofiness, and it's something that I really grew to appreciate.
You laugh now. Shamu as the seventh Shichibukai.
Sam, yeah.
I think that's clearly what's going to happen.
Definitely.
Greg, what stuck out at you? Like, which arc stuck out at you reading this, or which was a little harder to get through?
The early ones are actually a little bit. Well, the early ones. The buggy is a little bit harder to get through.
Yeah.
Because for an early arc for a shonen manga, I think it's actually quite long. It goes on for quite some time, and it's a little bit repetitive.
I agree with you. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't dislike it by any measure.
Yeah,
but like the first chapter, so much happens in that first chapter, and you've got so much going on that after the Morgan events, which are fairly concise, you've just got Buggy, and Buggy just it goes on, and
it's like two of the volumes or one of the volumes. I could check that while you're talking.
Yeah, it's a good chunk. And I mean, there's plenty that's entertaining in there. I mean, that's for sure. But I mean, I'm always surprised by how long it is for one of the earlier arcs. And I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough to have compared it to similar shonen manga arcs at the time that were running in Jump. But it's pretty long. When you look at
he worked on Kenshin
today,
before, so maybe he was also coming off of that.
Well, when you look at what runs today, I mean, you look at the new serializations in Jump, they go through their early arcs really fast, and that may be because they they have One Piece to compete with. Right. So I mean, it's a matter of the editors being like, "All right, that was cool. Show me something even cooler," and the authors just being like, "Wait, I need to catch. Hold on." And maybe just Oda had that advantage in the post Dragon Ball era, but it does lag for me a bit. And then you get into the Kuro arc.
Well, you completely forgot about Gaimon. I mean, there's that whole thing, which I forgot about rereading. I'm like,
so
oh right,
boring.
Gaimon.
See,
no, you know what? Yeah, go.
I've forgotten about it now, but it's entertaining, right? And you need, I think, if anything, that's what One Piece is kind of missing right now, is the Gaimon. We need a little bit more Gaimon in One Piece right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I forgot about Gaimon existing. I often do.
Do you mean just like really short one-off stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
And not even one-off. I mean, a volume off would be wonderful right about now.
I agree.
People are like, "Oh, Foxy." I'm like, what are you talking about? You totally needed Foxy.
Foxy was great.
Foxy was amazing.
Foxy was like one of my favorite things in this show. You know what? Gaimon going back, I probably have said this already, I appreciate a lot more than I think I did the first time, because at first you're like, okay, I'm trying to get through this series. Come on. But here, just what a welcome, like, little respite. But keep going on. Sorry, Greg.
No,
you were going to go into Kuro, beyond.
Oh, Kuro. Yeah, well, Kuro is just a pleasure to read. Usopp and his significantly smaller nose.
And different face, just completely different face. He looks
Different
so
type
different.
of nose in general.
Yeah.
Like wider nostrils.
Yes.
He's got like almost a Blackbeardy nose. In the...
Well, he was
Yeah,
young.
he
He was
does.
developing. So.
Well, yeah, Blackbeard's nose has since become Usopp's nose, so I think that's how that works.
In the anime, at least, right?
Yeah, just the anime. True. Yeah.
It's this arc meant a lot more to me when I read through it with Stephen's translations. This was one of the stories that when I went back and read, because originally I read the story with a Thai translation, or a Thai translation. A person from Thailand made an English translation, and bless their heart for their attempt, but it made some of the Chinese subtitles awful illegal things, which I've only seen through coincidence. I do not own any of them. Look like Shakespeare, and going back through Stephen, it was just like, whoa, oh wow! So this is what they actually meant, or like this is the what he was trying to do there, or oh, that was clever wordplay here or there, and it's I didn't become a full dedicated fan from that point yet. That came later, but it helped me to see something more in the series. It helped me see that he really does think about his dialogue, and this is me coming off of Dragon Ball, where two people beating the hell out of each other was the most exciting thing in a comic book. So it was one of those moments for me where it was like, wow, so manga can be more than this. Than this, just this action and adventure. It can also have an emotional quotient to it too, because if you talk to a lot of the early readers, I mean, people my age will say, oh yeah, the Nami event was like the most emotional point for me. But if you talk to people who were readers from like chapter 1, they'll continually, I mean, almost across the board, come back to the point of the breaking up of the Usopp pirate crew as being the most emotional.
It hit me a lot more than
them.
I have a very sordid and different history with One Piece, but it is a really impactful moment. Definitely.
And it's a big spread too. If you look at it, it's one of his. It's one of his first spreads where I think he really went out with this over the top kind of crying thing that he does. I mean, of course, he's had crying before. He's always had it since Luffy was crying when Shanks got his hand shorn off, or his arm shorn off. But if you look at each of the members, he spends a good panel. A part of that.
Well, there's also a lot of
spread.
space in the middle, too.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't know. It's a little bit.
Anyway,
I don't want to say bleachy, but.
Well, no, there's an actual background with trees and sky and clouds, so it's not. We're going to get in trouble by someone, I don't know who. The last one would be Baratier. We're halfway through. The Mihawk stuff just happened. What do you think, Greg, and then Jammer?
Well, the Mihawk stuff, and this is purely me looking at oh my gosh, this is so cool because look, he did this thing here. It's totally down to that, but
no, I agree with you.
But you've got the Baratier, which is based on a place that he's been that he's worked at. That if you want to see that actual location, you can check it out in the
OPP
One Piece
Japan.
podcast. One Piece podcast goes to Japan movie, but this is the appearance of Panda Man, and that is awesome. That is, I mean, Panda Man. When I found out about Panda Man, I was just like, "You've got to be fucking kidding me!" There is a hidden character in this series, and that started just my fierce search for the existence of Panda Man throughout the series. It's so cool.
Yeah, I felt like you must have a little bit because I'm reading the SBS and their guy is like, oh, I see this panda guy in the background. Who is he? Oh, it's a wrestler named Panda Man. He shows up. You might see him again. What a crazy thing. You do not see that in other anything really. I feel like that's just such a attention to detail. I mean, also, Greg, such a different experience going through this arc, having been to Barate. I'm like, which guy is which guy, and where did this happen? And he's breaking the plates.
Yes,
he's breaking them again. It was really cool and surreal. That whole thing, and what good food. They're not kidding when you read this, and it's like the food's good. It's very good. Jammer, what did you think about Barate? Baratier.
Well, Baratier, it's kind of weird. Like, this is another instance where I guess the circumstances of me reading it affected my enjoyment. I'm not sure what it was, if it was me or not, but I feel like the first 4 or so volumes of One Piece came out at one time, or not at one time, but in quick succession in America. And I feel like either it was really hard for me to find 5 and on, or there was some sort of gap in release. So, after I finished like the Kuro arc, like I was like, awesome. It took me a lot of effort to actually get, some steam into the series again. And just starting a whole new arc, it felt like a lot of work, because we were getting a new character. I wasn't sure what quite to make of Sanji and all these weird characters hopping around. And then all of a sudden, you have
Steve Buscemi?
Steve Buscemi.
Of course.
A very good looking Steve Buscemi. Not that he's not beautiful as it is, but
he is, just to
where
make
it counts.
sure. Yeah.
That being said, this looking back, like watching or reading this arc in retrospect is like so much better because of all the groundwork it lays. Like, this is our first look at the bigger world. And I remember back when, that ship gets, cut in half.
The galleon, yeah.
Oh my gosh, like seeing that, and I was just like, what? They have some crazy shit up ahead of them. Like, there's no way that, like, how can these guys compete? And then nowadays, Luffy and like Sanji and Zoro are like cutting ships in half or blowing them apart.
I didn't even realize Zoro's first. I really should have, because I'm a bad One Piece fan. But when he first shows up after the time skip, the first thing he does is he cuts apart a galleon. Not for fun. Yeah. He got lost, but
yeah, you're right. He had every right to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the wrong ship.
He was on the wrong ship. it's justified. That like, because I read through 6, and then I just had a hankering to look at 61 again for some reason, because there's so much mirroring with the beginning of the series, and we talked about this on the podcast when we went through it. I remember a lot, but I didn't even realize how much was going on between 1 and 61. It's crazy. We'll definitely talk about that more when we get to it in a month or two.
Go ahead. Really quick, I really appreciated just sort of this is really where he was starting to develop the much bigger world rather than just, arc. It was just like multi-layering of arcs and of storylines. And that's obviously something that's kind of a One Piece trademark at this point. But I just thought that was really cool how he was basically able to divert an entire storyline just to sort of give us a glimpse of what's to come. And that's pretty awesome.
And just to give you guys... go ahead, Stephen. Go.
Oh, and it's also something that, he would end up doing a lot more in the future. It kind of became a trademark of his, like, in Drum Island, when he hints at Ace and Blackbeard, because they had just passed through, and, stuff like that, where it's like, he just kind of continually sets stuff up while they're busy with something more pressing at the moment. And then it ends up like being like, oh yeah, we thought this thing we were occupied with was like a big deal, but it was actually nothing compared to this thing that he's hinting at right now. That's something that he started in the Baratier, and is one of his, I think, trademarks as a storyteller.
It's definitely my favorite aspect of his storytelling. By far. I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast itself a lot. Just to put things in perspective, I was looking, as you guys were talking about, like the length of arcs. The Buggy was a little over a volume and a half. The Kuro stuff was closer to 2-ish, and the Baratier stuff is 2.5, or I think it's 3 almost. So you could tell it's exponentially growing. I mean, Buggy and Kuro is actually very close. I think in the anime, though, the Kuro arc is, like, significantly longer than the Buggy arc, if I recall correctly, which is probably what explains my disdain for it earlier on, prior to reading. Any final thoughts? Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, one thing that's, I don't know, this is way too detailed and probably interesting to me. But if you look at the introduction of Mihawk, where he gets his name box, and I'm talking about the English edition here.
Yeah.
You can see that Doom behind him is written in a very specific font, a very strange font, and there's a reason for that, because if you look at the original Japanese version, the Don, it is a, I think we know by now it's a Don. The Don that is there is actually written in a very similar font that is it resembles, if you can notice there, the side of the hilt of his blade. Right. So it's just particularly noticeable on the exclamation point. But it was specifically made to look like the hilt of his blade.
I'm glad the English version at this point in its publication kept that. That's good.
The English version keeps that. I'm not sure if volume 25 also keeps with that.
I'll check that now.
But interestingly enough, in volume 25, when he has his other big, Don introduction, it keeps with the same font. I don't think I've seen Oda pull that since. But it's still one of those cool details that he has in the back of his mind that he's putting forth. And another one would be, and this is obvious, but his line to Zoro about being a frog in the well, which comes back in Fishman Island.
They don't keep it in volume 25, by the way.
They don't keep it in volume 25.
It's just a regular Doom.
It's regular Doom.
Regular Doom.
I have a Doom question. This might be more applicable to Steven. I noticed in early on, I think maybe just the first volume, maybe I forget when they stopped doing it, but at least in the English version, I don't think there were any dooms. It was all ta-da, and I was wondering if that was an Oda change or if that was just a translation change.
They mentioned that in SBS too.
Do they?
I think they do. I think I read that. I think he changed it at some point. Or someone changed it at some point.
Yeah, I think it's probably it was probably just a case of the translation and adaptation team at the time kind of noticing stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to say about the translation itself, which we're recording this before we do the first half of this podcast, so I am planning to talk about that there, just about the
which you've already talked about.
Yes, which I've already talked about regarding the translation and adaptation choices. But I think it a lot of it really comes down to just not, when you get a bunch of new series like this in at once, you can't, you don't necessarily know the reputation and all of these things that are kind of consistent hallmarks of the series until you've seen enough of it to recognize, that, there's this very consistent pattern going on, and knowing, which things are important, which things just happen to be sort of like the default mode for this writer. Is it just something he does, or is it something that has a greater or more subtle meaning to the series? And you just don't know these things, and so I think that's probably part of it. Is just eventually you get to that point where it has the SBS question. It's like, I noticed you do this dome thing a lot, and then it's like, oh yeah, I guess that is true. That is something that's very consistent, and then next thing you know, everything is doom or boom, or whatever fits for that scene. So
another note of Greg trivia off of that, there's one character in the series who consistently has an entrance onomatopoeia that is not don but bang. It's ben, and I don't know. When I read that, Stephen, I always hear like a shamisen, like a bang. But yeah, that's totally just me. But
should I ask who it is?
That is the traditional, I think, sound effect.
No, but which character gets that?
That's what.
Which character do you think it is, Stephen? Do you know? I don't mean to put anybody on the spot. I'm just
let's do it. This is our.
I mean, I would would assume it's either like Kumadori or one of the Wano, the samurai guys.
Very, very early here. It's
early.
appropriate to our podcast.
Oh,
this episode.
Reverie trivia corner.
Kobe.
Moment. Kobe.
No? All right.
Nope, not Kobe.
That got laughs.
Now give me a
Nope, not Kobe.
Zeph.
I don't know.
Nope, not Zeph.
I'm trying to
Steven?
think of who would fit that. Gaimon.
Oh, Kabaji?
Bingo.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. That would make sense.
Why?
Kabaji appears with a Ben. I don't know, because he's a performer. I don't know.
It's the unicycle.
He has all of the special attacks that are very Japanese in nature. Like I think in English he calls it the breath of death, but in Japanese it's Kaji Oyaji, which is like
Yeah.
It's a joke based on there's like 4 things that you should be afraid of, and it's what is it? Jishin Kaminari Kaji Oyaji, which means earthquakes, lightning, fire, and dad. So it's like the 4 terrors of your life, basically.
That's clever.
And then he had the other one where he just kicks up a bunch of dust so you can't see through it, and like the name of the attack was like the murder in the steam bath or something like that, because that's like a classic sort of Japanese like 2-hour murder mystery TV special sort of thing. So yeah, that was the thing. I was just like, what is Japanese about any of these first volumes? And that was all I could think of. So
I think there's one more thing that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, and that's Django, obviously.
Really, that's the one thing, not the art.
Do you want to talk about the art? Because it is a lot different than anything we see today.
Yeah, the characters are a little chubbier. I noticed that. It's like from the beginning.
I didn't notice that.
Just a little bit. Like they're not fat.
In recent years, they've come to suffer from Dragon Ballitis. So
You mean muscles? Blonde hair and muscles? Is that and superness?
No, but I very specifically remember transferring from the manga to the anime, and in the anime they were definitely lankier than they were in the manga, and then going straight from whatever chapter we are now all the way back to the early volume, they're a bit, I guess, chubbier or stubbier or something. Like basically proportionally, they are not as lanky as they're
like
currently.
Squishier or something.
Yeah,
Something about
They're
it.
just softer and rounder.
Yeah, I guess it's more Disney-esque. And also, they're not as detailed in a way. And now, like, the early chapters, like, probably, apart from the formerly color, panels and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they're almost look like coloring books in a way. As opposed to now where I guess, that he has so many assistants that they can, he could do more detail-wise and stuff. So, anyways, I just thought that was interesting.
Greg.
Yeah.
Steve and I assume we talked about this already. Right? The art.
Okay.
Yeah, Greg. Greg, did you have any thoughts?
I like how Oda has. I mean, he's very playful with how he explains away, not mistakes, but just things that pop up, things that impede progress or might vex a normal author. I mean, Toriyama Sensei is a little bit more, not humble. I don't want to even compare, but I mean, he's just like, "Yep, I messed up. Whoops, I guess I suck." Whereas Oda it's hilarious how he's kind of I don't know how to say makezugirai in English. He's a little bit like kuyashi when I don't know.
He's
this
a
is so
spin
terrible.
doctor. He's able to spin in a way that makes him look like a genius.
He's in the spin zone.
Yeah, he doesn't want to admit defeat, I guess.
He doesn't want to admit defeat. He doesn't want to admit that he's ever wrong. With his tongue firmly planted in his cheek.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of ways of explaining away things. And like Nami's growth, I mean, we were talking about Usopp's nose, right? It's like Nami's growth is, well, she's a growing girl. Usopp's nose, I'm sure he'd say the same thing. Well, he was only 17. So
Chopper later
growth
on.
spurt. Chopper.
Turned into
later,
a completely different creature.
Well, he's the only reindeer to eat a human fruit, so that's how when they get older, they get smaller and cuter.
Exactly. Yeah. So you'll see a lot of his artistic choices back then that have changed significantly over time. And it's interesting to see how he's able to explain some of them away. So that
I think
is
the big
always
one
fun to see.
is the woodworking guy. What's his name again?
Minatomo?
Oh yeah, Minatomo. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a perfect example of Oda's ingenuity in explaining away something that was completely wrong. Oh, there's this character that goes around and fixes doors. Okay, I think that's a good place to leave it. Greg,
With Minatomo.
With Minato.
You don't want to talk about what's his name? Django? The guy you said we would be remiss to not talk about?
Well, we did. That's why I said.
We did. Yeah. It's covered.
Oh, totally.
Love him. Dude.
That was
dude
more for
loves
the
Django.
dude, yeah. Hopefully we'll have the dude on at some point to talk about Django in a Django exclusive episode.
Call it Django
Django's
Unchained.
responsible.
Oh my god. Not even touching that one. So Greg, hopefully we'll have you back in the coming weeks as we continue to go through One Piece, and hopefully you'll have. I know you're a very busy man. I want to throw all of One Piece on you again, but yeah, whatever you're able to do, we'd love to have you on, of course.
You know me. If you throw One Piece at me, I won't shut up.
I think we did pretty well here. And it was really interesting. I've learned a lot today. I mean, things I never knew, and I'm really glad to go through this early stuff with you, Greg and Jammer. Why don't we round this podcast off?
Let us do it.
This has been the first volume of the One Piece read-through, covering volumes 1 through 6. And thank you guys all for coming on. Thank you, Steven.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Translatosaurus, and if you are a current reader, you can read One Piece weekly in Weekly Shonen Jump from Viz, because I'm translating that.
Yeah, if for some reason you caught up way quicker than you thought you were starting with us. And then,
Right.
It's, you know what? Doable. It's doable. We also have Steve with us. Steve, where can people find you?
You could find me on Twitter at Steve Yurko and on Tumblr, steveyurko.tumblr.com. I am a artiste. I'm a drawer of cartoons. I do comics. Check me out.
We also want to thank Jose Argumedo for coming on.
Okay. You can find me at Jose_CNN. I'm posting a lot of stuff there, I guess. I'm trying to think of anything I need to plug. Oh, I have a podcast now.
I was going to say.
Called Tape Jam. And you can find that at tapejam.podbean.com. Please check it out. I don't think there'll be another show until June because I'm super busy this month. And one of those things I'm busy with is OP Dallas. So
OPP Dallas.
OPP Dallas, sorry. And yeah. We got some cool stuff, at least rig-wise, ready for it.
Yeah, for those who don't know, we're going to Dallas to see how One Piece is made, the dub, and also the sub. So we're going to see, we're going to talk to voice actors, we're going to talk to people behind the production, we're going to talk to people behind the sub production, and we're just going to look around Funimation in Dallas and talk to fun people. Look forward to that. Bryan, where can people find you?
I can be found at Dark King Zoro on Twitter, all one word, and I am still directing season 3 of Teen Titans Go. Also look forward to season 2 of Rick and Morty, which should be starting up, I think, in a month. I can't wait to hear. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what everyone thinks of that season.
I'm sure we'll have something to talk about with that.
Yeah, I've
We
been
will have
sitting
opinions.
on it for a while,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm like, I can't wait till I can finally discuss things.
I'm excited. Before we go through how to contact us and how to talk about the manga, I want to give a little sneak peek about what we're going through next week. We're going through volumes 6 through 12. That is your reading assignment, everyone listening. If you want to stay up to date with us, that's the second half of East Blue. It goes from where we are now to The Legend Begins. I'll put it that way. That's the name of the volume. And joining us as a special guest next week, we may have more, but we know at least Miles from Crunchyroll will be joining us. I'm excited to have him on. He's apparently been a very long-time listener of the One Piece podcast, and this is going to be our first time having him. As we said, we are going to have guests from Crunchyroll, from Viz, including a lot of the editors who worked at it at the beginning, including Jason Thompson, Urian Brown, Alexi Kirsch, Plus, we're going to have Amy Marr from Viz come in, Marlene, who I think is currently doing Toriko for Viz, and many others. Plus, we're going to have artist guests like Joey and Bryan, who will be returning. I think the next time you're coming back is for Skypiea.
Yeah, unless you want me to come back earlier than
Well, if you'd like to come back earlier than that, you're welcome. We still have space open, yeah.
We'll see what my reading is like.
Yeah, I think that should be the test. But Ed, for those who want to contact us, they could not only hashtag OPReadthrough to let us know what they're doing, but they could contact us through these means.
Indeed. Well, I am on Twitter at Edward E. Festizio, and you are Zach_Logan.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. But as for the podcast, you can go to OnePiecePodcast.com, Twitter.com, YouTube.com, and Facebook.com/OnePiecePodcast. OnePiecePodcast.tumblr.com for news updates and funny pictures. One Piece Podcast is our Skype name. OnePiecePodcast@gmail.com is our email address. Subscribe on the Stitcher Smart Radio app or on SoundCloud. You can also subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Please do all three of those things. And you can also call us on our phone number. Zach?
That phone number is 347-497-MAJI. That phone number again is 347-497-6254. Call anytime.
Call anytime, Zolo.
Zoro doesn't have a Folo. Use Zolo.
So if you guys
Zolo, time to go.
So if you guys have thoughts about the next 6 volumes, please leave us a voice message, and we'll play that voice message between segments that we do for next week. Get a little fan feedback, because we've had people asking, "Hey, can I come on the podcast?" That's the best way to do it. I'm really excited. Some very seminal material next week. I don't know the word quite to describe. Actually, 2 weeks. So we're taking a week off. I should have probably said this to start out. We're taking a week off. We're going to have Steve's spin-off podcast, 20 Minutes of Bullshit, if you just want to hear him and One Piece Podcast regular, The Dude.
Who is probably going to be very upset that there wasn't more Django talk.
There'll always be more Django talk.
That's what 20 Minutes of Bullshit is for.
Yep.
I don't think they talked about it, but we're going to have an episode of that next week since we're going to be in Dallas filming. We'll return on May 28th with the second half of East Blue. So you have 2 weeks to catch up on these 6 volumes. That's the good news. And please, again, hashtag it at OPReadthrough. And you can follow us all on Twitter, where we'll be reading through it and probably posting pictures and talking about it. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we can't go through in the 3 hours that we spent. We promise future episodes will be shorter. This one's a little longer because we went through how we all got into the show, which is an in-depth discussion. So without further ado, my name is Zach.
My name is Ed.
We'll see you next week, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.